everything they want. And if you provide that, then you're doing, that's correct, and that's the best sort of animal welfare we can give to these animals. We shouldn't be forcing them either way, in or out. We should be, just monitoring the cows and seeing what they tell you, and you can, from their behaviour, see what they like and what they want.
Anthony, what do you make of that?
Yes, well, I would come back and I'd say that scientific research is showing that housing cows all year round in factory farm systems increases the chances of a lower animal welfare. So we are seeing potential increases in lameness because these cows that aren't designed to stand on concrete, they're designed to be out in pastures, they're standing on concrete all year round because they're in these buildings. They can suffer painful diseases like mastitis of the udder, which is extremely painful. And actually stepping back a moment, we're talking about cows, but actually we're talking about a specific breed of cows, high-yielding breeds of cows, and this is about milk production if we're talking about dairy. And those cows generally burn out quicker. They have increased rates of infertility. They get culled at a younger age because they are burnt out and infertile, and they can suffer metabolic diseases. So this isn't us as Compassionate World Farming saying this. This is scientific research is saying that it increases the likelihood of this. And so if we're moving to this system where we are seeing potentially hundreds of thousands of cows, and actually in Britain, you take a step back and look at the number of animals that are locked in factory farm systems, we're talking over 1 billion animals per year raised in the UK in these factory farm systems. That's 85% of all the farm animals in the UK. So we're saying we've got to look after these animals. Animal welfare has got to be a priority for the way they're raised, rather than focusing on yield.
Fraser, are there any alternative cattle farming methods here that could keep the cows happy? Because I know that is a top priority on everyone's list, really, but also in a way which means that you get the best product as well.
Well, I believe that's what we're offering them, and he mentioned about the mastitis levels, and I disagree with a lot of it. Firstly, I disagree with the whole factory farm. For me personally, I'm a family farm. It's a very much family-involved business. It's just on a larger scale. But with mastitis, in a controlled environment, you can control that a lot better. And I know here on my farm, my mastitis levels are very, very low. And that is because things are controlled. When you go out to a pasture and say it's continually raining and there's a wet gateway, because obviously all animals have to pass through a gateway, then you can get sort of flies in the muck and then get on the cow's teeth, and that can cause a mastitis. And with lameness, the cows, he said cows standing. The cows are not standing on concrete for 24 hours. If you have your shed set up correctly, the idea is the cow should lie down for as long as possible, and a cow will be lying down for 14 hours a day because you provide them with that ultimate comfy mattress.
Can I ask, is this just about the financial aspect here? Is this just because this is cheaper to do and it means that there's a bigger profit margin keeping cows indoors?
Not necessarily. I think what you've got to look at, if you look at all the new legislation that are coming in from the government, the government are a lot to fault for this because they allow cheaper imports coming in which are produced at a lower standard. We obviously have a very high standard in the UK that we have to comply with. Now, for farmers to keep complying with all this new legislation that's brought upon us, we have to invest in our businesses, whether it's our slurry management, our water management, or whatever. We have to invest. Now, when you're a very small farmer, it's very hard to be able to go to a bank and say, I need to borrow a six-figure sum to comply, so I'm not actually going to bring any more income into the farm. I have to spend this just to comply so I can continue to produce food, which is, as farmers, what we are primarily here to do.
Yeah.
And so for a larger farmer, because he's got more cows, he can dilute that cost, and therefore it's more of a sensible investment from from a bank's perspective.
Well, Anthony, sorry, Fraser, I'm just gonna stop you there because I would like Anthony to respond just to some of the things that you're saying, Fraser, because I mean we're talking about mega farms. Anthony, of course, you're saying that this is not good for the animals. You're not a fan of this. Is there any feasible way to reduce the amount of so-called mega farms and make farmers' lives and the cows' lives easier?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. The government's priorities at the moment are about tackling pollution in rivers and lakes, the decline in nature, food security, and tackling NHS and reducing the deaths from the biggest killers. We believe that our consumption of meat and the factory farms and the growth of factory farms is actually driving all of those, and so we think the government really needs to look at its policies. And there's a report out by Natural England last week that actually showed the what's called the Environmental Land Management Scheme. It's money that the government gives to farmers to take certain actions, and has replaced the Common Agricultural Policy when we came out of Europe. And that report shows that actually farmers who've taken those grants and taken the action are seeing an increase in the number of birds, bees, bats, butterflies, and other species there. So the government can take positive action, can start driving up or taking action on climate change and things that it has got international commitments to do. And when we talk about factory farms, Fraser was talking about, you can manage its food and make sure it's got the same food in every mouthful, the same energy in every mouthful. And what we're actually seeing is that the consequences of that are that 40% of the land that grows cereals in the UK grows cereals just to feed animals, and then we eat the animals. That's or we take the milk from the animals, or eggs from the animals. That's actually a really inefficient way of feeding the UK, because if you look at the amount of protein, for example, that you get, if you eat 100 grams of plants, you will retain about 40% of the protein. If you feed that to an animal, they retain about 40%, and then you eat the animal, that's 40%. So 40% of 40% is a lot less than you'd be getting if you ate the plants directly. So actually, to get food security, we should be looking at diversifying our farms, and we're seeing this. There's thousands of farmers across the UK who are part of the nature-friendly farming network who are transitioning to regenerative farming, and that's locking in carbon, it's recovering nature, and it's better for animal welfare.
So you're saying it is doable, Anthony, but like I said, we were talking about the financials earlier. Finally, Fraser, thank you, Anthony. Fraser, I do have one final thing just to put to you, just because it's come up in one of the messages that has come through as you've been talking. A message saying, I cannot believe, this is from Tony, saying, I cannot believe any true farmer would say cows should be kept inside all year round. What's your response to that?
I'm not saying they should be kept in. What I am saying is, by having them staying in, you can control the environment a lot better and offer them a good welfare standard. Now, as was mentioned earlier on in the programme, it doesn't matter whether your cows are in or out or whatever. A lot of it's down to what the farmer requires and what he's trying to obtain. But by having animals in, you have got a lot more control. Everything is monitored by technologies, and you can control pollution a lot better because you've got, you have all your manure is contained. It's not just being, animals excreting all over the fields. It's being contained and then spread in an appropriate manner to a crop that's, at the right timing for a crop to take up those nutrients. Every farmer wants the best welfare for his animals. That is number one for every farmer, and we get emotional if there's anything happens to an animal. Regardless if you have 50 cows or you have 1,000 cows, you still get emotional about an animal that has an issue, because we care for them, and what we want is to provide the best life possible for those animals, to produce food for the population, which is our primary role as a farmer. And then that animal has had a good life, and then at the end of her life she then goes from producing milk into the food chain to provide beef. and that's, you know, the circle of life.
That's
If
the aim, really, with your job. Yeah, Fraser, I'm going to have to stop you there yet again. We could obviously talk about this and for the rest of the afternoon, but we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Fraser Jones there, giving us an insight of a third-generation farmer out there in Wales. What do you make of that? Maybe you're on your own farm listening to this. If you've got any input, let me know. And also Anthony Field, who was with us as well, who's the head of Compassion in World Farming UK. Lots of your messages coming in on this already, and I'll try and get to some very soon. Right now, just gone 2:31 on a Wednesday afternoon. You're listening to Rima on 5 Live. Right now, it's time to get our headlines with Stuart Clarkson.
The voice of the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Inflation has risen back above the Bank of England's 2% target. It rose to 2.2% in the year to last month. That's up from 2% in June. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, says the figures show many families are still struggling with the cost of living. The Scottish Government has confirmed it'll follow the UK Government in no longer giving winter fuel payments to all pensioners. The benefit will be means tested instead. It's part of wider emergency spending cuts to make up for budget shortfalls. Ukraine is continuing to push further into Russian territory. President Zelensky says Ukrainian troops have moved forward in several directions in the Kursk region today. It's its most significant incursion since Moscow's invasion heads into its second week. And public health officials in the West Midlands say they're hoping to reduce restrictions very quickly after a 12-mile stretch of canal towpath was closed following a toxic chemical spillage. Tests are continuing after sodium cyanide got into the water near Walsall. With all the sport this afternoon, it's Molly Stevens.
Thank you very much indeed, Stuart. Conor Gallagher is expected to return to Chelsea's Column training ground today after landing back in London last night with his Atletico Madrid transfer in their balance. The England international has been pictured in the La Liga club stadium on Saturday and spent 5 days in a hotel in Madrid, but his £33 million transfer has been stalled due to the Atletico's lack of funds to buy him. An interesting announcement from the Premier League for this season. They've launched a new social media account to try to reduce frustration with the VAR system. The handle is @PL Match Centre, and it will provide near real-time updates and explanations regarding officiating for every match. Experts from the PGMOL, the league's officiating body, will also clarify the laws of the game and provide additional information and updates on the VAR decision-making processes when necessary. The aim is to be as transparent as possible. The Premier League season starts on Friday with Manchester United versus Fulham. United have completed the signings of 2 defenders from Bayern Munich for around £60 million. Centre-back Matthijs de Ligt and full-back Nusayr Mazraoui have joined the club. Kieran McKenna's Ipswich Town prepared to start life back in the Premier League against Liverpool on Saturday lunchtime after an absence of 22 years. Ipswich and Wales winger Wes Burns has praised manager McKenna and tips him for further success.
It's attention to detail on every aspect of everyone's game. I think they took a massive chance on him when he'd not had a first-year managerial job, but you know, they're reaping the rewards of taking that chance. I mean, to sum him up as a manager, he's definitely going to go way above and beyond what anyone probably thought that he would have done back then.
Well, you can hear the full interview with Wes Burns in an hour-long 5 Live Sports special programme as Aaron Paul and guests look ahead to Ipswich Town's long-awaited return to the Premier League. That's Ipswich Town back in the big time on 5 Live and BBC Sounds from 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. Real Madrid midfielder Eduardo Camavinga will miss Wednesday's UEFA Super Cup game against Atalanta and the first portion of the season after sustaining a knee injury. Now, some big cricket news transpired in the last 24 hours that Ben Stokes will miss the rest of the summer with a hamstring tear, and in his absence, Ollie Pope will captain the England Test cricket team against Sri Lanka for their upcoming 3-match series. Former skipper Michael Vaughan says the injury might actually benefit the team going forward.
You know, I guess if there was ever a time to get injured, this is at that time. You know, let's hope that he can get fit for Pakistan, New Zealand, and everyone will be thinking about next year. 2025 for the England men's team. You know, India at home in Test match cricket and the Ashes away from home, which is primarily what this group is all set up to do.
Well, in the women's 100, Welsh Fire have qualified for the knockouts after beating Southern Brave by 9 wickets, and they could even secure a top spot and qualification for the final, but that depends on the outcome of Trent Rockets against Oval Invincibles. That gets underway at 3 o'clock, at the same time as the men's 100 match between Southern Brave and Welsh Fire. Then tonight at 6:30, Trent Rockets take on leaders Oval Invincibles. You'll find commentary of those on 5 Sports Extra, but for now, that's your latest from BBC Sport.
This summer, immerse yourself in the world's greatest classical music festival. From the epic Holst and Beethoven to Sam Smith reimagined, and a symphonic Florence and the Machine. The BBC Proms. Watch on iPlayer, listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
This is our wee part of the United Kingdom.
Live from here at Old Trafford.
I think it needs a massive overhaul. BBC Radio 5 Live. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Afternoon, welcome to Wednesday, just gone at 2:36. It's Rima here with you through until 4 o'clock. Lots to talk about. We'll be hearing about a podcast called Descendants. A poet and musician takes a big, deep dive into their family history, their ancestry, which I think for a lot of people is quite a fascinating thing. Stick around for that. First of all, we have been talking about panic attacks. We've been talking about this because an Australian weather presenter had to actually stop his presenting because he was having a panic attack on air. This has gone a bit viral online, so lots of people talking about this and what it's like to have panic attacks if you do have panic attacks. Get in touch, let me know what it's like for you and how it exhibits in you. So many of you being so generous with your experiences and being really open about how panic attacks have affected your life, so thank you so much. Dan's on the line, Dan in Oxford. Hello, Dan.
Hiya.
Tell me about your panic attacks, how they started and sort of how they affect you.
Yeah, so I had panic attacks ever since I was a child. I'm mid-30s now. I didn't really know what they were when I was a child. Part of it stems from a metaphobia, so I've got a phobia of vomiting. But it sort of, it extends across my sort of whole life as well. Yeah, just didn't know what they were when I was a child. I thought, just felt like something terrible was going to happen. I've experienced it at school, so it made me feel very, I think kids can feel very different to everybody else, because they don't know that other people are also experiencing that, especially adults. Like I thought it was just I was just a silly kid who who couldn't function properly.
And did you tell anyone when you were a kid that this was happening to you and you felt like that?
Yeah. So I talked to my parents about it. I did have CBT and things when I was about 12, but I think that didn't really help because it's not really made for something so complex. I think it can help with certain things, but I think it didn't really help me at the time.
And so how do you deal with it now? Because I was talking to someone earlier who said that the drugs didn't work, changing, taking out red meat out of the diet didn't work, eating more veg didn't work. All of the, nothing that they have tried has actually worked, other than sort of changing other parts of their life and making room for it.
Yeah, I think I have therapy, and I think that's helped me to be a lot more honest about it and see it as part of me and part of what makes my brain tick. And I think seeing it like that can take away that fear of panic itself. I think a lot of people's experience of panic attack, mine included, was the fear of having a panic attack almost becomes, that's what makes something panic disorder, rather than just experiencing a panic attack, is that you become scared of having a panic attack, and that sort of takes over. And coping mechanisms, so there's some things you can do, like if you feel like you've got a panic trigger and you're entering that sort of feeling of panic, then like looking around the room for like 3 objects you can touch and 3 sounds you can hear and 3 body parts you can sort of
that seems really grounding, a really grounding way to
that's the
think
aim
of
of it,
things.
Yeah, the aim is to ground you and make you, because to stop your mind sort of taking over.
Well, John in Middlesbrough joins us as well. Hello, John.
Hello, Rima.
Thank you for getting in touch. Tell me about how you, because we've heard a little bit from Dan there about sort of, going through his life with these panic attacks, but take us, those of us who maybe haven't had any experience with this, talk me through a panic attack.
Well, a panic attack, they can start from nothing. They can be caused by being in a certain social situation, like you might be in a store or perhaps you're in a school or something like that. And it seems to come from, for me, in the middle of my chest. It's like every cell of your body suddenly becomes inhabited by fear and dread. And then you start to breathe more heavily, and you start to sweat, and your body tingles, and you think you're about to faint or go mad. I never thought I was going to die, and sometimes.
But have you ever fainted? Have you ever actually just lost consciousness?
I have once fainted when I gave blood. Once.
Okay.
But it felt similar. I suppose I often had a fear of fainting, actually. Having seen people faint in certain situations in my workplace, etc., I've had to deal with it.
Are there any specific triggers for you? Do you know that if you do a certain thing, if you're going to be in a certain place, if you're going to talk to a certain somebody, that this might happen?
Well, I've worked in schools a lot historically, but also any event, it can be a happy event, you're at a funeral, or a wedding, or a christening, anywhere you have to be where you can't get out of the room easily. I noticed someone earlier on was talking about if they go to a situation like that, they sit on the aisle seat at the end of the aisle.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, for instance, I went to a funeral last year of a good friend, and I told them I'm going to need to sit at the back of the room just in case something happens, because sometimes it can come from nowhere, but those situations trigger that for me anyway.
Having those conversations though, because Dan was just saying that he feels better being honest about it, being open about it. It takes a lot of courage to be open about something like this, because we know that the world is moving on. We're all understanding our mental health a little bit better, but there are still prejudices against, like, a panic attack, get over it. Have you come to grips with that?
I'm getting more to grips with it now. When I was a child and even a teenager and a young man, I'm 62 now, I didn't tell anyone about it. I was embarrassed about it. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't talk to anybody about it. It wasn't until I started seeing a counsellor about 15 years ago that I started getting it out into the open. And that Australian guy, I saw that clip this morning, and the way he dealt with that was just so admirable. I just thought it was fantastic.
I've never seen anything like it, John. I've never seen anyone who is clearly, he was really distressed, and you could see it in his eyes.
That's right.
Because for anyone who hasn't seen this video of the weather presenter, you can see he's searching with his eyes to the side of the camera for someone else to pick up on what he's going through, and he handles it so well.
Exactly.
That's in the workplace. Dan, are you still there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Talk to me about having panic attacks in the workplace, because you've been talking to your manager and your colleagues about it. How do you approach those sorts of conversations?
Yeah, so for a number of years, I didn't speak to anybody at work about it. When I was in my early 20s, I worked in pubs and bars and things, and I'd just sort of try and get on with it. And it ends up feeling a bit like you've got a double life, because you've got this sort of part of you that knows that you have these things, and you've got this other part that's trying to just work and get on with it, and I think that makes it harder. But yeah, now I'm very honest with my boss about it, my colleagues. They all know that I suffer from anxiety and that I have occasional panic attacks. And maybe I'm as honest as I can be about it in other situations, like in the pub talking to friends, anybody.
So if I work with someone, right, because this is where we take all of this information and we apply it to our actual lives. If I'm around someone, if I'm out on a night out, or if I am at work and someone has a panic attack, as a bystander, Dan, what should I do?
A lot of it depends on the person, but I'd say let them take the lead, but give them the space to do so, I guess. It's helpful to get out of a loud situation and somewhere quiet for a lot of people, and give them the space to just to recover, I guess.
John, what would you like in terms of help, if you were in public and having a panic attack?
Well, what the chap just said then was absolutely perfect. I couldn't have said it better, really. Yeah. Just give people the space to get out of that situation, because often you want to get out of that situation.
John,
but for me, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I honestly, I really appreciate this. I really thought we'd talk about panic attacks and no one would want to come and talk about it because it seems so personal. But this is a really great insight, and I'm sure for lots of people who do have panic attacks and haven't talked about it for shame or embarrassment or any of those sorts of really complex feelings, this is so helpful. So Dan in Oxford and John in Middlesbrough, thank you very, very much. If you're listening, and maybe you've been listening to this and you've been thinking, I don't really know if I want to share about my life and I don't want to share about what's happened to me, that's absolutely fine. That's completely fine. But if you do want to share, if there is a bit of advice that you would like to put out there, or if there is a bit of a public service message that you'd like me to share with others who haven't ever seen a panic attack go down, in real life, that you'd like other people to know how to deal with them, let me know if you've got an experience to share. It is absolutely fascinating, this stuff, and we'll come back to this after 3 o'clock as well, because we will have an expert on panic attacks giving us the lowdown on what happens physically and mentally when that happens. First though, we're going to follow a story now. It begins with a photo of a 19th century footballer and takes in the slave trades in the South American country of Guyana, the American poet Scott Heron, modern-day Liverpool and Cambridge University. If that sounds confusing, I promise my next guest will explain it all, because it's the story of his life. He's the poet and musician Malik Al-Nasser, and he features in the BBC World Service podcast Outlook. Hello, Malik. We're just waiting for Malik to get on the phone line, but we're going to hear all about this story in a few moments, as soon as he's there and he's ready. We've got some gremlins in the studio, this happens from time to time. But this is an incredible story. World Service podcast Outlook that tells the story of basically where we come from, which is, I think everyone is interested in that. Malik, are you here?
Hi, Rima. How are you?
Hello there. I'm really well. I'm glad that you're here, because I just gave a little bit of a teaser of your story, and I'll be honest, on the face of it, Malik, doesn't make any sense. What's this all about? Where does this even start?
Well, it's a pretty epic story. What it starts with is a very contemporary issue of racism. I'm of mixed heritage. My father was a black man from what was then British Guyana, and my mother is white Welsh. So I grew up in a mixed family, but we grew up on a white council estate in Liverpool in the 1970s. And, if I had a penny for every time someone told me to go back to where you came from, I'd be a rich man now. And that was just the sort of soundtrack to my childhood, if you like, just hearing these racial slurs. And consequently, I think I grew up and really wondered, where do I come from? My father died when I was young. I was taken into care as a kid. I emerged from the care system semi-literate at the age of 18, having spent most of my childhood working on a farm rather than being at school. And it was only a chance meeting with a poet.
BBC broadcast.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Changed things because Gil took me out on the road with his band. He mentored me, and then through poetry he encouraged me to become literate. I went on to graduate from all three.
I would like to listen to BBC podcasts.
Podcast series frequently mentioned on the web include BBC Radio Podcasts, Sports Strangest Crimes, Miss Me, and others.
Society that had always made me feel like I was worth nothing and I didn't belong here. But because my father died when I was quite young, I never got to know anything about my Guyanese heritage. All I knew is there was this place called British Guyana. My father came from Demerara. They made sugar. We all knew about Demerara sugar. And my father used to say to me as a kid, one day I'm going to take you back to the sugarcane. And that's all I knew, really. After many years of sort of wondering who my ancestors were and what my ancestral roots were, BBC Scotland produced a film called Scotland's Lost Captain, and it was a story of a guy called Andrew Watson, who was discovered by the Scottish Football Museum as a footballer, a black footballer, in 19th century Scotland. And this guy had the same family name as my father. My father was Reginald Wilcox Watson. My grandfather was George Edward Watson. I was Mark Watson. I converted to Islam and changed my name to Malik al-Nasser. But the Watsons in our family, we knew the name was Scottish, but we didn't really know anything about the origin of it, and my father wasn't alive to tell us. So when I saw this footballer on this BBC Scotland programme, that he'd captained the Scottish national side in 1881, thrashed England 6-1 at the Oval. He'd gone on to play for a range of clubs in Scotland, including Queen's Park, who were the biggest club in the world at the time. He'd gone to London and played for the Corinthians. He'd come to Liverpool and played for a club called Bootle FC, which was the forerunner to Liverpool FC. Recently just found out he actually turned out one game for Everton as well at the time. And he was just this incredible character, and I was thinking, oh my God, am I connected to this guy? Like, he looks like me, he comes from the same place in Demerara as my father, he has my father's family name, there's got to be a connection. And that started me on what was to become not just a journey of a lifetime, but a journey that would uncover an epic tale.
Do you know what? As you've been talking, that is the word that has been going around in my mind, just epic. Just the parameters of this story are so wide and they're so far-reaching. Did you visit Guyana, and what did you actually find out there? Because you were talking about belonging and the racism that you suffered in Britain.
BBC's Afghan service reporter Hafiz Maroof has visited returnees in eastern Afghanistan who are facing a bleak future.
At the basic crossing point in Furham, eastern Afghanistan, families arrive home with heavy hearts. The queues are long, the heat unbearable. Children and the elderly are carried in wheelbarrows, barely surviving as the temperature soars to more than 43 degrees Celsius. Hundreds of expelled Afghans face this every day.
Which I encountered, and I didn't have to go back far to encounter it. My father was born in 1918. Slavery was only abolished in Brazil, which neighbours Guyana, in 1888. So that was 30 years before my father was born. So my grandfather had slavery in living memory. Now, during the period...
For you knowing that, because that is, for many of us, that's just an intellectual fact. For you knowing that that's what your grandfather, that's what your ancestors were living through.
BBC documentary.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
What I had was I couldn't get the archival records because during the period of slavery, slaves were not given, or enslaved people were not allowed to retain their names. So as soon as they were enslaved in Africa, they were brought to the Caribbean, South America, Guyana, wherever, their names were changed, and they were given family names with, names of their parents and their kin and their tribes. They were given names like, hope, charity, faith, like just not meaningless names really. And they were only given first names in most cases, not surnames. And their births were not registered in the same way as white people's, so they would be born about so-and-so, So you're trying to find these records and it becomes really blurred. But there are a few anomalies, and mine was one of those anomalies, where you had the people who owned the plantations who they abused their black women and they had children with them. And those children would be mixed race. They were given a different status. They would be called, for instance, free women of colour. And those women would then, in some cases, marry or have civil partnerships with white Scottish or white European merchants or planters. And they would have children, and their names would be registered with first names and surnames. So in the case of Andrew Watson, we knew from his marriage certificate that his father was called Peter Miller Watson, who was a Scottish sugar merchant who worked for a firm that had 3 branches to it, a Liverpool branch, a Demerara branch, and a Glasgow branch. The Liverpool branch was called Sandbach Tinney & Co., namesake of Samuel Sandbach and Philip Frederick Tinney. The Demerara branch was called McInroy Sandbach & Co., namesake of James McInroy and Samuel Sandbach, and the Scottish one was called McInroy Parker & Co., namesake of Charles Stewart Parker and James McInroy. So these three entities had shareholders, and all the shareholders were intermarried. They were all family members, and they had this tripartite arrangement where they were shipping slaves from West Africa to the Caribbean. They were shipping goods from the Caribbean back to Liverpool and Scotland.
And that was your family? That was your family that we're talking about?
I found out that Andrew Watson was a cousin, that I was descended, when I got back to Guyana, I found out that I was descended from Andrew Watson's uncle, his father's brother. And my cousins, who I discovered when I got out there, were living on plantation land that had been passed to my grandfather in a place called Rossignol in Berbice, which actually borders the Blairmont plantation, which is a massive sugar plantation with a big refinery in Berbice, in Guyana. And that plantation was owned by Sandbach Tinney, which was the Liverpool branch of the firm that Peter Miller Watson, Andrew's father, actually managed their affairs.
Listening to all of this, though,
he had his own plantations, but he also managed the family plantations, because he was a member of that family, so he managed all their slaves, all their sugar, all their molasses, all their ships. It was just a humongous multinational corporation.
Listening to all of this and all of this, history that you're giving us, I'm wondering about the link between all of that and you growing up in Liverpool in the 70s. Is there a link?
Yes, but it was the complete antitheses of that experience. They lived a life of ultimate privilege. I lived a life of real deprivation. And this was the result of, that kind of colonial legacy, if you like. Because even though some of the black children of these slave traders inherited land in Demerara or Guyana, that in and of itself did not give them generational wealth in the same way as the white descendants did. So the white descendants, for instance, of Samuel Sandbach, they formed a bank, the Bank of Liverpool. Bank of Liverpool swallowed up Martin's Bank and became the 6th largest bank in the UK. And in 1969 sold out to Barclays. Their headquarters in Liverpool was Barclays' regional headquarters until 2007. So the generational wealth that was distributed from the proceeds of enslavement of this firm were humongous. And I'm writing a book about it currently called Searching for My Slave Roots, which is based on the BBC article that I did in 2020 of the same title. And that book is going to be available on HarperCollins on the 8th of May, 2025, and it'll be available from 7th of February to pre-order online. And really what I'm doing in that book is I'm telling this epic tale, but it's not just a tale of my history and my roots. What it does is it changes what we thought we knew about the British Empire, about slavery, about colonialism, about its links to industrialization, and a whole range of different subjects. I mean, these guys founded universities, they had shipping lines, they had insurance companies, they had banks. They built whole entire communities and cities, and they changed the demographic of the Caribbean with the indentured laborers that they brought in from Calcutta and Shanghai to populate the plantations after slavery was abolished in 1834 by the British. So now you'll find a massive population of South Asians, particularly Indians and also Chinese. In Guyana, they're almost 50% of the population.
It's such a fascinating history. Thank you for sharing it with us, Malik Al-Nasser, giving us a real history lesson there in so many ways, and also linking it to his own heritage and his own ancestry. He features in the BBC World Service podcast Outlook. If you want to hear more about that story, big thank you to Malik for being with us this afternoon. Right now we are approaching 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. Rima here with you through until 4 o'clock. Right now though, time for the news.
The Voice of the UK. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
And with the BBC News on 5 Live at 3 o'clock, I'm Stuart Clarkson. UK inflation has risen for the first time this year. It's now back above the Bank of England's target of 2%, standing at 2.2% in the year to July. The rate, as measured by the Consumer Prices Index, was at 2% in June. The increase is less than many economists had expected, but these people think prices are still too high.
My outgoings are quite a lot each month out of what I have incoming, so it's difficult.
Even things with like budget ranges in supermarkets, like you might walk in one day and it's gone up fairly significantly.
I used to have some nice beers delivered and things like that. That's gone.
Government Minister Jess Phillips has described an increase of reported incidents against women and girls on the railways as a national emergency. New figures show the level of violence, harassment and sexual offences rose by 20% in the year to March when compared with the previous year. Talks have been taking place to try to resolve a 2-year-long pay dispute with train drivers. This morning, members of the ASLEF union met officials at the Department for Transport for the second time since Labour won the election in July. Ukraine says its troops have moved further into Russian territory despite denials from Moscow. President Zelensky has said his forces advanced by up to 2 kilometres into Russia's western Kursk region and captured more than 100 Russian servicemen so far today. The Russian region which neighbours Kursk has declared a state of emergency. Finland's Prime Minister Petteri Orpo has backed Ukraine's offensive.
Russia has started its illegal aggression against Ukraine almost 3 years ago. Every day they attacked against Ukrainian people, cities, hospitals, schools, infrastructure. And that's why I think that Ukraine has the right to self-defense. And it's clear that they can do their operation in Kursk.
People are being urged to avoid a 12-mile stretch of canal between Walsall and Birmingham because of a toxic chemical spillage. Walsall Council says it's too early to say how sodium cyanide got into the water. And social media adverts promoted by Stephen Bartlett have been banned after a watchdog said they were misleading. The Dragon's Den investor was seen pictured with health products from Huel and Zoe without making clear he had business interests in both companies. The Advertising Standards Authority says customers needed to know he was an investor to be able to make an informed decision about the products. That's the news on 5 Live. With your sports headlines, it's Molly Stevens.
Thank you, Stuart. England midfielder Conor Gallagher is expected to return to training at Chelsea's Cobham training ground today after arriving back in London last night with his Atletico Madrid transfer very much in the balance. Gallagher's been in Madrid but has been unable to complete his £33 million transfer as the Spanish club needs to make one major sale to fund the deal. Real Madrid midfielder Eduardo Camavinga will miss tonight's UEFA Super Cup game against Atalanta and the first portion of the season after sustaining a knee injury. Cricket and in the Women's 100, Welsh Fire have beaten Southern Brave by 9 wickets to secure their place in the knockouts. They could also secure top spot and qualification for the final, depending on the outcome of Trent Rockets versus Oval Invincibles, which is just getting underway on 5 Sports Extra. Southern Brave against Welsh Fire is also just starting. That's in the men's 100. Then this evening, 6:30, Trent Rockets take on leaders Oval Invincibles.
Driven through the covers.
Every huge boundary.
Clobbered over her head. Away to the boundary for 4.
Every huge 6.
Fielder underneath it. Can only watch it go over his head.
Every wicket.
Should be a simple catch. She's gone.
Catch it all. It's gone. The 100th Finals Day. This Sunday from 2:15 on 5 Sports Extra.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Radio 5 Live, the voice of the UK.
On digital radio. On BBC Sounds.
And ask your smart speaker
to play BBC Radio 5 Live. BBC Radio 5 Live. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Good afternoon. Just gone 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. It is Rima Ahmed in for you on 5 Live. Up until 4 o'clock, so we've got a good hour left. We're going to be talking panic attacks in a few moments with an expert, but also so many of you have shared through the course of the show your experiences with panic attacks, how it's affected you, how they start, how they're triggered, but really importantly, how you deal with them. That's off the back of that Australian weather presenter who was struck with a panic attack live on air. You can find that actually on the BBC News website if you go and have a look, the full video of it, and him talking about it. And if you would like to share your experience, I'm here for you. I've got you back for another hour, like I say, up until 4 o'clock. We'll get into that in a few moments. First though, it's not quite the news Chancellor Rachel Reeves or any of us will have been hoping for, but inflation has risen for the first time this year to 2.2%. But the rise was widely predicted because of gas and electricity prices falling less than they did a year before. Helen Thomas is CEO of macroeconomic research business Blonde Money and former advisor to George Osborne. Hello, Helen.
Hello there.
So prices are rising faster. Where exactly are we talking about?
Well, they are rising faster, but as you say, it's all about compared to what was expected. One of the quirky things that's gone on is on hotel prices, which may be relevant to many people who are away at the moment, but actually they didn't rise by as much as thought. So they rose more the prior month and they came off a bit this month, which it just goes to show that actually things are still quite volatile out there. If even in the summer months you're not getting, some of that big boost to hotel prices that you'd be expecting.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me what prices are monitored, across sectors, and hotels wasn't one that I was expecting. Give us a bit of an insight into some of these other things that, we keep tabs on.
Oh, well, I mean, one of the things that I think has been relevant to obviously everyone has been food price inflation. Now, actually, that's come right back down again. It's around about 1.5% now. But we were back in the day talking well in the double digits, 10, 15, 20%. Of course, I'm sure lots of people remember when the bills were going through the roof. But here's the thing. We all, I would imagine, still feel the effects of that. So although the price rises are coming down, they're not going up by so much, we remember they've jumped up, and we're all still quite cautious about that because it's eating into budgets. So this is one of the funny things about this number. Although the number has come down, prices are still rising, albeit not quite as much. And I think a lot of people are still feeling that.
It is a very small rise, we should say that. The Bank of England interest rate setters will be wanting evidence, though, that it's not going to keep rising, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is how they look at everything. I mean, they just cut interest rates. It was a very, very close decision. But in their forecast, the Bank of England have, they actually see that inflation rate going back up again to up towards 2.75% before it comes back down in the years ahead. So we should, if they're right, we should actually get used to this number going up a little bit more before it comes back down again. But look, they still cut interest rates despite that. I mean, their target is 2. So, even though we're a bit above, they have still cut interest rates. It's a huge battle, actually, it's going on in the Bank of England over whether, what is the next couple of years going to bring? Is it going to see that moderate further with these price rises, or will we get that nasty sting back in the tail and it'll come back again? All of which means, yes, interest rates have fallen, but they're not about to cut back down to what we saw many years ago.
Well, for Reeves, she's got her budget on the 30th of October, so a little while away, but still close enough so that she'll be keeping an eye on things. What should she be watching for at the moment?
Oh, well, yeah, Rachel Reeves, well, she's desperate to get out the traps and get on with things, isn't she? Because just before Parliament broke up for the summer, she made this statement where she accepted the public sector pay rises of about 5.5%, and she at that point also announced a restriction on the winter fuel payment for pension not in receipt of pension credit. So she's clearly keen to get cracking with getting on top of the public finances, and as I put it, she started as she means to go on, which is she wants to be able to give people those pay rises, but obviously the money isn't there, so what she gives with one hand she'll be taking with the other, and I don't think this number today changes that. That's the message we're going to get on the October 30th budget.
For right now, though, Helen, what does this mean for interest rates and mortgages? Because mortgages is the big one, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's been quite interesting response in the mortgage market these last few weeks. There's started to be a bit of a war between some of the mortgage providers, which is seeing the interest rates go down, which is obviously welcome news for anybody looking at fixing their mortgage rates or moving off their deal and onto something new. We probably are in a bit of a better place for the next few months on that, where that rate is going to come down a bit, because I say Bank of England have cut rates. Today's rise in inflation wasn't quite as much as expected, so we may well get another interest rate cut before the end of this year. The market actually thinks there will be 2 more interest rate cuts before the end of the year, but as we know, markets are not always the most accurate forecasters of things. But broadly speaking, at this moment, the it's probably, I would think, welcome news for homeowners.
Well, tomorrow we'll learn the latest growth figures as well. What can we expect there, Helen?
Well, growth, the perennial issue for our country.
It's a buzzword, isn't it? Growth,
exactly.
growth.
Everybody wants to talk about it, but it doesn't seem to come from anywhere. I mean, this is the other thing we all have to look at, is that we're a bit stuck. You know, Britain has got a bit stuck for years. It's got worse since the pandemic because obviously there was a hell of a lot of money spent on propping everything up. There's a big debt pile that the government has to finance, and that pays a big interest rate to do it. So that is just going to always make the government's room for manoeuvre. So really, it's where is that growth going to come from? And I have to say, you know, well, we've seen one government give it a go. We're about to see another one give it a go. And you know, the jury's out for now, but obviously Rachel Reeves will hope she can convince everyone that she can do it.
Well, just before I let you go, Helen, it's one thing to look at all of these, and there are so many numbers, and, you know, it's easy to look at them all in a bubble, but how do we compare to other major economies in the Eurozone, you know, against the USA? How are we doing?
Well, we're a bit between them, really. I mean, Europe has some of its own challenges, an ageing demographics, and they have struggled to sort of create these big technology companies that you can get growth from. And then you look at America, which has amazing technology companies and has managed to do a lot better with growth. One thing to throw into the growth question is actually immigration. America, during these last few years where they've had better growth, have actually had quite a bit of immigration. Whatever you may or may not think of that, and everyone has their own views, from a pure economics perspective, in America at least, it has contributed to their growth. So these things are all tied up, you know, as you say, they sound very dry, very economics, just these numbers, but it's all part of the same puzzle of how do you get people working and being productive, and what sort of economy do you want? And as it stands, well, the UK's it's sort of average, and as I say, Rachel Reeves will be hoping to get it up into the top.
Glowing review. Average. It's average.
yeah, I know, sorry.
Helen Thomas, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being honest. Thank you for crunching the numbers for us as well. I think that's very much needed. CEO of macroeconomic research business Blonde Money, Helen there, giving us a bit of an outlook as to where we are in terms of inflation. And like I say, tomorrow we'll see what those growth figures look like. Now, through today's show, we've been talking about the weatherman, Nate Byrne, who had a panic attack live on ABC News Breakfast in Australia yesterday. If you haven't seen this, and it has been going viral on social media, here is the moment it happened.
We've got big falls right through that part of the country, and we're going to see lots more rain in the days ahead. I'm actually going to need to stop for a second. Some of you may know that I occasionally get affected by some panic attacks, and actually that's happening right now. Lisa, maybe I could hand back to you.
You certainly can, Nate.
Lisa Miller is Nate's co-presenter.
It's fantastic that he has been so open and transparent about it, and the response when he first wrote about it and spoke about it was that everyone said, oh, thank God, Nate's not perfect. We thought he was perfect, but actually he's now sharing something.
Fantastically well handled that. Nate spoke to the BBC later on.
I had to rush from my desk to the weather wall in our gorgeous studio, and when I got to the wall, I realised I was just ever so slightly out of breath. And I know that in the specific position in front of the wall is a trigger for me for panic attacks, and it triggered one. It's a physiological response. My body starts tingling, I start sweating, just everything in my body is screaming, run, go, get out. I knew I needed to throw back to my hosts, and I could see out of the corner of my eye, they were doing a move in the studio. There wasn't a clean shot. I sort of had to fill while having a panic attack, and the only thing I could think to fill with was, hey, I'm having a panic attack, so everybody understood what was going on straight away. The response from the public has been incredible. I mean, almost 100% positive and supportive. People sharing their own stories, which is great. The only thing is it's maybe a bit overwhelming because so many people have a story about anxiety or have some experience with it. A lot of people have come after I first spoke about it publicly and said to me that they didn't know that what they were having was a panic attack. They didn't know that other people had panic attacks. It happens, and there are things we can do. So there are medications, there are techniques. I mean, I use some medication, I use beta blockers. There are lots of other things you can do as well. The thing is, if you identify you're having a panic attack or that you've got an anxiety problem, it's best to go see a doctor. Talking to someone is probably the best thing you can do.
Nate speaking about his experiences with having panic attacks, and I'm so pleased, I'm so glad so many of you have been getting in touch over the last few hours talking to me about your experiences with having panic attacks. I was a bit worried that it feels a bit personal, doesn't it, to say, oh, this is the thing that triggers me into having a real moment where I have to breathe, where I have to remember where I am, where I have to sort of get through it in any way possible. But you have shared that, and I think it's really powerful. Neil from Chipping Norton is on the line with us right now. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Rima.
Seeing Nate Byrne there in Australia having that panic attack live as he's doing his job. Have you seen that video, by the way?
I haven't. I intend to.
Just hearing about it though, how does it make you feel?
So I can hear it in his voice straight away, and my own experience is almost directly comparable, except I was talking to 30 people in a room.
Oh wow.
Nate was obviously broadcasting to the nation type thing, and we had a cheese and wine evening for a group of garden centres. It sounds so ordinary, but I was the sales guy and I was stood up there having to present, and within a few seconds of speaking, my throat started to close, I dried up, and in the end I literally couldn't speak. I handed over to my MD and he took over for a few minutes, and then slowly but surely I sort of got myself together. But the main thing that really got me was I had no idea what was happening to me. I think I was 35, 36 at the time.
And that was the first time ever?
Yeah, if you would have asked me on that night to go and stand in front of 500 people and present, I'd be itching to get up on that stage. I've got no sort of fear about getting in front of people. So when it actually happened, I literally had no idea what was happening.
And talk me through sort of your physical symptoms of what was happening, because we've already had a caller on, John it was, who said that once when he was having a panic attack, it felt like he was having a heart attack.
I mean, I wasn't panicking to that extent. My knees had turned to jelly. My throat just literally by every word I spoke just got narrower and narrower and narrower, so that in the end I couldn't actually get words out. And you know your pulse is racing, you know your heart is racing, you know you're a bit breathless. But I think it's the panic in the word panic attack. It's that element that it almost self-fuels how you're feeling at that time. And I think a couple of weeks later, after that event, I did have to speak at a conference, and my mum actually gave me some beta blockers for it. And what I noticed was I was so much more relaxed. There was no issue with that. But any sort of edge or sort of flexibility or I forget what the exact word for it now, but your vitality for presenting, that edge really it just basically dulled everything.
The thing is though, the thing that I'm hearing from you, Neil, is that you don't know the reason, you don't know the trigger of that panic attack, and in terms of everything else that was going on, it was very normal for you, and it wasn't a stressful situation, it wasn't a panic-inducing situation. Have you had other panic attacks since?
Yeah, but pretty much always in those sort of work situations. I mean, I could literally be talking to a friend in the pub, and you can feel this overwhelming sort of level of anxiety rising in you. And this is to a very good friend, someone who I'll be perfectly relaxed in their company. And it might be a trigger of a question being asked about something that you're just not quite sure of. And you know, my natural inclination is to answer things, is to speak, probably sometimes before my head's engaged, etc. And I know you can very easily, well, I certainly could very easily get myself into a sentence or a hole where I'm not prepared for what I'm about to say, but my natural eagerness would make me do it, and that in itself would then cause, you know, that anxiety to
And
rise.
we've all been there, you know, we've all been there where, you know, we're asked a question or we're not prepared for something, and it makes us panic a little bit on the inside. But for a lot of people, it doesn't, you know, exhibit itself in a full-blown panic attack. Neil, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really do appreciate you sharing your experiences. Neil from Chipping Norton there, and so many more of you sending in messages. I'm sorry if I don't get to your message today, but keep sending them and we'll get to as many as we can. And if you want to chat on air, let us know if there's a different angle maybe that we haven't covered. Joining me now is chartered psychologist Melanie Phelps. Hello, Melanie.
Hi, Rena. Hello.
It's been really fascinating hearing from so many different people from you know, across the country, telling us about their experiences with panic attacks. Let's start at the very beginning for those of us who don't know. What is a panic attack?
Well, a panic attack is just a manifestation of an extreme feeling of anxiety, and actually what causes them biologically, and that's why there's biological and physical symptoms, is an output of adrenaline into the body. And the adrenaline is a hormone. It's our fight, flight, flee response. It gears us up, so it speeds everything up. And it makes us breathing irregular, speeds up our heart rate, puts our blood pressure up, etc. So that's actually what's happening physiologically.
How common are they?
Very common and increasingly common. I mean, something like 1 in 4 people will experience either depression and/or anxiety disorders in their lifetime. So they're very common, and I think becoming even more common because we live in a very fast-paced world where there's an awful lot of adjustments that we have to make. So one of the key things that I see is people that have had, and this isn't the only reason, but people have had a lot of different life adjustments in a fairly short space of time. So having to adjust to a difficult event or a significant emotional event, and then, you know, it's almost like the feelings and the experiences haven't had time to be properly processed, and they put the threat alarm to just turn it up a bit, and then you get everyday stressors, or it could be a biological trigger, so maybe you're a bit dehydrated, maybe you're a bit hungry, low blood sugar, or feeling a little bit too hot or too cold, or a little bit under threat, a little bit exposed somehow, and then that alarm system, the threat system, is switched on immediately.
That makes a lot of sense, because quite a few people that I've spoken to just today, Melanie, have said there was no trigger. There's nothing that I can think of that would have caused me to feel like that and to go through something like that. And it's quite, some of the symptoms are really extreme. People thinking that they're going to die, like as extreme as that, you know, thinking that they're going to faint, thinking that this is it. When obviously, you know, as someone said earlier, the doctor said no one's ever died from a panic attack. Obviously, really easy to say when we're having a normal conversation, and I don't feel like I'm on the precipice of a panic attack, and, you know, hopefully you don't either. But for anyone that does live with this, what is out there for them? Because we've also heard from people saying, I've tried everything and nothing has worked.
Yeah, I think for therapy, certainly we have a two-pronged approach. One is learning about, you know, what causes the anxiety and the panic, and how to cope better, and have some coping strategies on hand. And when I looked at what happened with Nate, you know, his coping strategy, and he said, I just knew I had to take a moment, regroup a bit, hand over to someone else, and then come back, and recognizing that, yeah, I think I could be going now into a panic attack. So there's the coping strategies, and then the other part of it is actually going back a little bit, to kind of doing a bit of a chain analysis. Let's look at what's been happening in your life. Have there been circumstances that you know, haven't really processed, or maybe you're trying to get used to the idea of a big life change or traumas, life events, starting to really unpack them and talking about, well, how did you really feel at that time? What was going on for you? Because the feelings can be kind of bracketed, and these are exactly the feelings: feeling, you know, overwhelmed, feeling things are a little bit out of control, things are uncertain, unsure. These are all the feelings of vulnerability and a bit exposed, maybe, that maybe don't belong to today. They belong to these things that have happened in the past that are just kind of coming back. So when we unpack all of those, that's really helpful. So therapy, there's, as the other callers have said, sometimes some medication really helps, and certainly beta blockers are an as and when medication, and they can help slow down blood pressure, slow down your pulse, and bring your body back to kind of a better baseline, really. And yeah, I think just get it, talking about it, naming it, don't, you know, but just telling people this is how I am, normalising it.
It's so powerful, and I keep saying it, but I honestly didn't imagine the response that we've actually had today, with people getting in touch and saying, yeah, this is a real thing that I have to deal with, because for so long panic attacks and things like that have just been so misunderstood. We've got this message, we've got so many messages coming in, Melanie. I'm going to read a few. This one says, I've suffered from panic attacks for a number of years. The first one made me think I was having a heart attack. Yeah, heard quite a lot of that today. You can feel them coming on. This person says, you feel a lot of energy in your body. I've always found that releasing that energy really helps. Go for a run, dance, anything that lets you release the energy. We had another message as well from Liz in Loughborough, because I did ask for any sort of coping mechanisms, anything that helps. See what you make of this, Melanie. Liz says, I have panic attacks, and my most successful grounding activity is to list 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and a flavour in my mouth I can taste. She also finds humming really helpful. Even just reading that out has made me feel a bit calmer, quite honestly.
Yeah, and they're really well known and very helpful. So that the last one is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, and it what it does is grounds us completely in the moment, because you have to think, what am I seeing and hearing, and what's happening now, rather than going into kind of going with the thoughts of, I don't know what's happening to me, I feel terrible. You know, you're kind of focusing your thoughts on the here and now. And the other one is also a really helpful technique if it's appropriate and possible to do so, exercise. So running on the spot, jumping up and down, moving around quickly, that kind of gives a feedback to the brain, essentially, that if there was a threat, because the brain thinks that the threat is now, I've run away from it, and it discharges the energy. And you know, it's a bit like when you're sitting in a car, you're revving the car, and you've got the brake on, you know, that it's like it needs to go. So if you can do that, that's helpful. And I think in any case, having regular exercise is really helpful for mental health generally.
It feels so unfair, though, to think of people struggling with this, with your body all of a sudden going, oh, we're in danger, panic stations, when actually you're just trying to, you know, go and do your big shop, or like just do your job. And I'm really glad that we're talking about it, because this message says, thanks for talking about panic attacks. I'm a 45-year-old director at a marketing company in London. So many would see me as tough and bulletproof. However, 2 years ago, I had my first panic attack whilst driving my family to France. That sounds really scary. It was the most frightening experience, and I had no idea what was going on. Thankfully, I'm now able to notice when a panic attack is coming on and have the tools to deal with it. For example, meditation, breathwork, all of those things that you've been talking about, Melanie, which are really important, aren't they? And I think we do have to say, like, for anyone who, maybe because there might be someone listening who has felt this and never knew what it was, there are coping techniques out there, are things out there that you can try to help calm you down.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, just to pick up on the, you know, the seats seem to come out of nowhere. And when you said, oh, it happened when I was driving, and Nate said, oh, this tends to be a trigger when I go to the weather wall. It's not that the driving or the weather wall is the problem. It's the last time you were there, you felt panicky, and therefore it's like a repeated pattern. You know, so we have a lot of problems with people going to big supermarkets, and you know, it's not the supermarket, it's just that you feel a bit anxious because it's a big wide open space and there's an onslaught on the senses with the smells of food or noise and so on.
And I'm sure it's important to tell people as well that actually there's nothing wrong with you. You're going out and about and you're feeling like, what is wrong with me for feeling like this, for doing something that everyone else does that's really normal. It's just a thing that your brain's doing.
Yeah, so it's like you've got an oversensitive alarm. The alarm's very powerful, it works very well, it's just working appropriately for now. So it's a bit like the car alarm, the car's being stolen, the alarm's gone off again. And if you can, I know it's easier said than done, but if you can try not to avoid certain places, because otherwise your world shrinks and your life shrinks.
Absolutely.
Supermarket, I'll just avoid all supermarkets and I'll do online shopping, you know, and your world shrinks. So it's just to kind of tell yourself, I'm safe, I'm okay, my alarm's been triggered here, this looks like it might be, and take some breaths, I'm going to regroup, and you know, if I can move around, or you know, some people go and splash their faces with cold water, you know, just kind of bring myself back to the present. I'm safe and okay, and then
ground yourself. Melanie, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Melanie Phelps there, chartered psychologist, giving us some tips, reassuring us really. And I know it must be so hard if this is something that you do live with and something that affects your life. But if you've got any tips, if you've got any advice, if you've got a story that you want to share, I'm here with you for another half an hour until 4 o'clock. It's Rima on 5 Live. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. So do keep sharing, and I'll share as much as you send in if we can possibly get to it. Right now, though, has just gone 3:32, and it is time for your headlines with Stuart Clarkson.
The voice of the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Rima, thank you. Good afternoon. The government says it is tackling what it's called the scourge of violence against women and girls, and says it's a core mission of the new government after figures showed an increase in reported incidents on public transport. It went up by 20% in the year to March compared with the previous year. UK inflation has risen for the first time this year. It's now back above the Bank of England's target of 2%, standing at 2.2% in 12 months to July. That's up from 2% in June. Ukraine says its troops have moved further into Russian territory despite denials from Moscow. President Zelensky said his forces advanced by up to 2 kilometres into Russia's western Kursk region and have captured more than 100 Russian servicemen. And public health officials in the West Midlands say they're hoping to reduce restrictions very quickly on a 12-mile stretch of canal towpath. It's been closed after a toxic chemical spillage. Tests are continuing there after sodium cyanide was found in the water in Walsall. With all the sport this afternoon, it's Molly Stevens.
Thank you, Stuart. England midfielder Conor Gallagher is expected to return to Chelsea's training ground today after arriving back in London last night with his Atletico Madrid transfer in the balance. Gallagher's been in Madrid but has been unable to complete his £33 million transfer as the Spanish club needs to make one major sale to fund the deal. Brighton and Hove Albion have a new manager this season. They start their season away at Everton in the Premier League on Saturday. Boss Fabian Hürzeler was quizzed by fans live on BBC Radio Sussex on Tuesday. The German became the Premier League's youngest permanent manager when aged 31. He took charge earlier this summer. Hürzeler was asked by a fan if he viewed his new job as a stepping stone for his career, and this was his response.
I'm here for the success of the club, and I don't have to shine individually. What I want to do is like improving the players, improving the squad, give everything I have. That's what I will promise to you, that I will give everything I have for this club, for the success of the club.
There are 3 first-round matches tonight in the League Cup. We'll have commentary of Leeds United versus Middlesbrough here on 5 Live. That's an 8 o'clock kick-off at Elland Road, with updates of Plymouth Argyle at home to Cheltenham Town and Sheffield Wednesday, who travel to Hull City. Their 7:45 kick-offs. Real Madrid midfielder Eduardo Camavinga will miss tonight's UEFA Super Cup game against Atalanta and the first portion of the season after sustaining a knee injury. Cricket, and in the women's 100, Welsh Fire have qualified for the knockouts after beating Southern Brave. They could even secure a top spot and qualification for the final, but that depends on the outcome of Trent Rockets against Oval Invincibles. Henry Moran is at Trent Bridge.
Yeah, this is a virtual quarter-final between two sides that will be hoping to be there on finals weekend at the Oval, and then potentially Lords for the final on Sunday. Brilliant start for the Oval Invincibles, two-time champions. They had the Rockets at 3 for 3 early on, but a good partnership involving Ash Gardner from Australia has given life to this Trent Rockets first innings, and the score has just passed the 50 mark. Gardner is on 34, 4 wickets down now, 51 from 46 is the Rockets score. The loser goes out.
Thank you very much indeed, Henry. Commentary continues for you on 5 Sports Extra. Now, Charlie Taylor is in Southampton for the second match of the day there after that earlier win for Welsh Fire women. It's now Southern Brave men against Welsh Fire men, Charlie.
Yeah, and at the moment it's going fairly well for the Welsh Fire. They just lost another wicket though. Steve Eskenazi joining Johnny Bairstow back in the dugouts. He made 28 eventually. Eskenazi Bairstow making 17. We've got a break in play now. It looks like one of the Southern Brave players has sustained a bit of an arm injury. It is a meaningful one, this, for Southern Brave men. They're doing well in the table. However, if they lose this and Phoenix win tomorrow against the Manchester Originals, then they would be knocked out. So they need to win this one, the Southern Brave men. We are 54 balls left in this first innings. Commentary continuing online.
Thank you very much indeed, Charlie. And finally, BBC Sport and ITV have agreed a deal to broadcast next year's Women's Euros. Every match of the tournament, which begins on the 2nd of July, will be shown in the UK on either the BBC or ITV, with the final available on both channels. That's your latest from BBC Sport.
On BBC iPlayer. We're all going on a summer holiday. 4 celebrities and their loved ones travel from the Amazon to the Andes.
This is something that we will never forget.
But with no flights, no phones, and no bank cards, this is no holiday. Kelly Brook.
Oh, this is going to be brutal.
Scott Mills.
One more day like this will break us.
Collar Bikini.
I wouldn't even call it a race anymore, it's a test.
And Jeff Brazier are stepping up to the challenge.
We're walking in the middle of nowhere.
Celebrity Race Across the World starts tonight on BBC iPlayer.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
This is our wee part of the United Kingdom.
Live from here at Old Trafford.
I think it needs a massive overhaul.
BBC Radio 5 Live. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Good afternoon, welcome to a Wednesday. It is Rima Ahmed here with you until 4 o'clock. And if you're anything like me, I've been trying to sort of leave the Olympics behind me. It's time to get over it now, have a few weeks off before the Paralympics. However, if we can have a moment just to reflect, that's quite nice, isn't it? Let's take another listen to one of the most thrilling moments for Team GB at the Paris Olympics.
Hopbrun's got one last push. They're getting closer and closer and closer. With 10 metres to go, with 5 metres to go, I think they've done it. It's a photo for gold, and I think they've done it. Celebrations from the women's squad: Lauren Henry, Hannah Scott, Lola Anderson, and Georgie Brayshaw. They have won Olympic gold.
Absolute scenes, as you heard there. Lola Anderson, Georgie Brayshaw, Hannah Scott and Lauren Henry winning a gold in the women's quadruple sculls when they snatched victory from a Netherlands team that had been in the lead for the majority of the race. They spoke to Rick and Rachel on 5 Live Breakfast this morning, and Lauren began by telling them about the end of the race when it wasn't completely clear to anyone who'd actually won.
I sit in the bows of the boat, so I'm the first across the line, and I probably have the best, one of my roles in the race is to kind of know where we are, and I had the best view, and I could tell we were sort of 10, 20 centimetres ahead of the Dutch bow girl when we went across the line, and I had to wait a few seconds for it to come up on the scoreboard that we could see.
So even though you knew before you'd seen it come up on the screen?
I wanted to be absolutely sure, because it was a bit too close to like...
It was a gut feeling.
Yeah.
We had a gut feeling, but I think you couldn't... Otherwise you'd have ended up as a terrible meme celebrating early, wouldn't you?
It was really funny. You can see there's a video, and they've done it in slow motion, where Lauren points at the board, and then Hannah starts to celebrate, and then Lola starts to celebrate, and then I start to celebrate last, like at the front of the boat, and it's just like literally just this like going down the boat, everyone realising what we've done.
Yeah.
Starts sobbing or something. And, yeah. Emotions.
Yeah. All of it understandable reactions. Can you try and describe for us, Lola, how it feels at the end of a race like that, just how utterly exhausted and physically spent you are.
I was going to say, people always ask, you know, how did it feel as soon as you crossed the finish line? And I think they're asking to be like, did you feel amazing?
Elated,
like all of that. And I'm sat there thinking,
you feel
first
sick.
You feel pain. Yeah, you feel a lot of pain. You catch your breath back, and then you hear Lauren screaming and celebrating, and yeah, it sounded like happy screams and not, you know, screams of agony. So I thought, oh my gosh. Then that's when the adrenaline from like the happiness and the relief and everything just like floods over you, and it does take the edge off of the pain.
Yeah. So the adrenaline flooding in gives you the energy to celebrate, because I'm amazed how you even have the energy to scream or put your hands in the air.
I think I lie down on Hannah, to be honest. Hannah, she's holding me up quite literally.
Yeah, as soon as I pull her back, I'm like, come here. But yeah, it's nice. Like, I think it's nice we can celebrate together as well. Like when we cross the finish line, like we look for each other, and it's so much more fun to celebrate as a team. I think than like when you're by yourself, it's great, but like it's when everyone's had the same race, we all know what was happening in the race together. So yeah.
Also, you timed it quite well, because you were quite early on in the Olympics, weren't you? So did that mean that you had like a week or so to really enjoy yourself?
Yes, we had. I was going to say we had like 10 days off after we'd finished racing before we had to come home. And I mean, there were some media commitments at the beginning of that, but for the majority of it, we were just having a really, really good time.
To get through that boring, same questions over and over and over, and then you get through that and you can really enjoy yourself. We did hear, who is it we were talking to, Rick, about a sort of end of Olympics party? Was it the triathletes? It was, wasn't it? So,
yes,
so it was Alex
and the random mix of
people, Alex
yeah.
and Beth who turned up, and we were like, who else was at the party? And they said the rowers. And we asked,
oh no,
who?
I know.
who partied the hardest?
Oh, we're rowdy.
And I think
my
we
guess
agreed.
was rowers.
Well, yeah, Rick's guess was rowers.
Did they agree?
Well, we think the triathletes just aren't used to that kind of action. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think the thing is, you're saying closing like Olympic party, and I don't know which one you're talking about.
Well, there's our answer.
Yeah, and that's the worrying thing. We met Alicia a few times, so I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear
I'm not sure which one. Yeah.
Well, one Olympian gold medalist is the same as another.
At the Oakley House.
So what was the most random encounter you had with another like GB athlete or another from another country?
I think I was watching athletics with Mo Farah, which was pretty cool.
No, really?
Yeah,
that's decent.
Yeah, that was really cool.
You also had a bit of a viral moment, didn't you? When you went on, was that you, Hannah? When you went on the walkway for the medalists?
Oh yeah, Hannah had a very good time on that podium.
Oh yeah, I was dancing.
You were dancing with the Japanese gymnast.
Yeah, so we had to do something. We were on the walkway. We're never going to be on that again. So yeah, we just had a bit of a dance up on the stage, and they were playing loads of music, and I think then that just meant we had to do something.
It's so good having Hannah. Champions Walk was amazing, and Hannah like leading all the dancing and got everyone in spirit, and everyone was just dancing with all the crowds, and I think that's one of the best things about the whole thing. It was just
that was incredible. A good innovation, wasn't it?
Amazing, yeah.
Because you obviously, with everyone who's there at the rowing event, they'll see you get your medals, but the opportunity to parade it again fully on view.
The crowds were the crowds in Paris have been incredible, and that's made it. Like, I remember winning our medal, yay, that's amazing, and then going up on the podium to get our medal, and the roar from the crowd, that was what has really made it for me. And then the Champions Walk.
And the Eiffel Tower.
And the Eiffel Tower, yeah, that was also very cool. Yeah. I was going to say, they played music, and we were awkwardly just sort of like stood still but like bopping about, and it looked very much like Year 6 disco vibes.
It looked like rowers.
And then Hannah comes on and goes, no, this isn't good enough, and she just grabbed this little Japanese boy and starts throwing him around on the stage.
An Irish jig.
It was so good, because they loved it. They absolutely loved it.
Exactly.
And then everyone was just like having the time of their life.
It was just dancing in front of the Eiffel Tower, and that's just like, I don't know. I think there's pinch me moments, and that was one of them for us, I think.
It must feel surreal. Does it? When you do you like, get that sort of out of body? Was that me moment?
Yeah, like it hasn't really sunk in yet. Like, I don't associate like the gold medal still with like winning the Olympics and what that means. Because I think before the race we were very much like, okay, we're here to win the race, but not necessarily you associate winning the race with winning the Olympics and everything that came with that. And that was part of our sort of strategy to deal with the pressure of the situation.
We hear a lot of athletes these days talking about process.
So we all process, and then so is taking quite a while for it to actually sink in that that's what we did and that's what we achieved.
What an amazing sort of retelling of what was going on behind the scenes of what we saw there at the women's quadruple sculls with Rick and Rachel on 5 Live Breakfast this morning. If you were missing a little bit of the Olympics, I'm sure that will tide you over until the Paralympics begin. Now, courts have been busy today after the disorder and rioting that spread across England and Northern Ireland last week. Let's speak to the BBC's Andy Gill, who's at Chester Crown Court now. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
First up, Julie Sweeney has been appearing at Chester Crown Court. What do we know about her?
Well, she's 53. She appeared in court today via a video link from the Stowell Women's Prison in Cheshire, and she's from a place called Church Lawton, which is near Alsager in Cheshire. She basically wrote on Facebook that a mosque should be blown up with the adults inside, and today she admitted one charge of sending a communication threatening death or serious harm. At various stages, she wiped away tears as she appeared via this video link. This comment that she made on a Facebook page at the beginning of this month, of course, came against the background of that violence that flared after the fatal stabbing of 3 young girls at Southport on Merseyside. The court heard that Julie Sweeney was responding to Facebook posts which showed images of people helping to repair Southport Mosque after it was damaged in the violent disorder. And Julie Sweeney wrote, "It's absolutely ridiculous. Don't protect the mosque, blow the mosque up with the adults in it." Now, the prosecution said that she wrote this on a Facebook group for the Kidsgrove area, that's just over the border in Staffordshire, which a Facebook group which normally carries items about local events and lost and found items. It has just over 5,000 members. The prosecution accepted that this post was made out of anger, not because of racism, and it was reckless rather than something genuinely intended to put people in fear.
Has there been, from what we've seen, a really unusually fast processing of these cases, and how does that actually affect the people who are appearing at the court?
There certainly has been very fast turnaround. I know that last week the Crown Court in Liverpool, for example, brought forward the sentencing of people who'd admitted being involved in the violent disorder, both in Southport and in Liverpool. And this case that I've been covering in Chester today, the post was made on August the 3rd, I think it was. Julie Sweeney was arrested a short time later when people alerted police to what she'd been writing. She's spent only a week on remand in prison, and she's appeared in court today for sentence. Normally that would take a lot longer, and it's very clear it's a deliberate policy by the courts to show that if you take part in the kind of violence, or if you make rather reckless posts about it, like Julie Sweeney has done, then you're going to get put before a judge, and if you admit it or you're found guilty, you're going to be sent to prison in pretty short order.
Andy, thank you for the update. The BBC's Andy Gill there at Chester Crown Court, giving us a bit of an idea of what's going on with these really fast processed cases, fast-tracked cases of those who were involved in the disorder, in the rioting, and sometimes inciting, saying quite ridiculous things really online, like blow the mosque up with the adults in it. Of course, we'll be seeing more of this sort of thing over the coming weeks and months, I am sure, and you can catch all of the latest right here on 5 Live. Now, we've had a massive response on the show today to our discussion about panic attacks. It follows a clip that's gone viral. It's of the Australian weatherman Nate Byrne having a panic attack live on ABC News Breakfast in Australia yesterday. Here's the moment it happened.
We've got big falls right through that part of the country, and we're going to see lots more rain in the days ahead. I'm actually going to need to stop for a second. Some of you may know that I occasionally get affected by some panic attacks, and actually that's happening right now. Lisa, maybe I could hand back to you.
You certainly can, Nate.
exceptionally well handled by Nate. If you haven't seen the video, it is up on the BBC News website in full. It was just a really interesting insight into what happens when someone has a panic attack, especially when there's a camera on you. You're due to broadcast. Lots of you getting in touch talking to me about your own experiences, some not as extreme as that, some seem really serious to me as well. You've also been sharing your thoughts on how to manage this, how to live your life whilst knowing that if this comes up, if you have a trigger, that you can handle it. Alison in Cardiff has been in touch and is on the line now. Hello, Alison.
Hi.
Speaking about panic attacks today, I've been quite surprised actually that so many people have been so open about their experiences. Have you found that? Have you found that people are getting a bit more open with what they will share?
Definitely, yeah. I think it's, and the more people you speak to, you know, I'll speak to someone about it and you'll find they've experienced them as well. So I think the more people talk, I think perhaps since COVID as well, people's mental health has been sort of higher up on the agenda and people have been talking more about the effects of that. And I think generally, yeah, there's definitely more of an openness to talk about it. And it does help. The more you talk to people about it, that definitely does help.
Absolutely. It seems like it. We had an expert on earlier who said that panic attacks are actually really common, although they can exhibit in lots of different ways. We've run the entire gamut today, I think, of people who sort of, and it sounds funny to say, but some people saying, oh, I just get a bit of a weird feeling, to other people saying, I feel like I'm having a heart attack. I feel in the moment like I'm going to die and no one can convince me otherwise.
I definitely did.
Is that where you fall on the spectrum?
Yeah, I even went to A&E twice because I thought I was having a heart attack. I think it's the physical symptoms that take you so much by surprise. And I think the expert was saying, you know, they are like the physiological response, but they just feel so real. So I would feel as if I was passing out, and I'd feel like I was having a heart attack, and I just needed to get out of the room and into some fresh air. You know, and you definitely feel that sense of panic. But then after a couple of visits to A&E, I sort of thought, no, okay, that's not happening. But then it replaced it with something else. You know, I had a lump in my throat, which was another physical symptom. Thought that was something, you know, but...
when you say lump in your throat, do you mean like before you cry?
Yeah, although it really felt more physical than that. So of course then you think, oh God, I got cancer. Yeah. So you start to worry. So yeah, it is those physical symptoms. But I definitely, I had counselling through work. Mind are really good, and that's free to access. And I didn't have to wait very long to find someone to talk to. And I did end up going to my GP, and I did end up on medication. So probably need to review that because I've been on it for quite a while, but it's that, you know, do I come off it? And
yeah, of course, yeah, because that's another element to all of this. Some people try everything, including the drugs, including changing diet, including giving up alcohol, all of these things that may be triggers, and actually none of it really helps. We also had someone get in touch about how they deal with it. James in Suffolk, actually, he says, what helps above all is knowing that it will pass. It always does, within minutes, no exceptions. But in the moment, are you rationalising that?
Yeah, I think you can. I think once you've been through it a few times, and I think the gentleman earlier said nobody's died from a panic attack. So it's like, you do try and rationalise it. And physical exercise helped me, so I run quite a lot now. So just getting out for some fresh air, you know, running has definitely helped me as well.
And do you know what your triggers are, Alison? You don't have to share them, but do you know what they are?
I do. So it's sort of a lot of people who've come on and said, not necessarily they don't know what the trigger is. I definitely do, and it's something that I was worried about, and then I just keep thinking about it, and then that would sort of trigger it. And I think then it was just like a massive breakdown. I think it all just got a bit too much, and then that was the sort of turning point, really. But even then, you know, I couldn't eat. Couldn't go out of the house, you know, so that sort of led, I think it got sort of just one happened, you know, quite closely after another, and it sort of peaked.
And we've all been there as well, because so much of this is so relatable, even if you've never had a panic attack before. That feeling of having an issue, whatever it might be at work, it might be with your family, it might be in a relationship. And I've certainly been there before, because if you live a life, you will, at some point, have a problem that feels like it's consuming you. That it's all that you think about. Sometimes you feel a little tightness in your chest about it. You might feel a little brick in your tummy. thinking about it. But it's when that becomes bigger, isn't it? When it starts affecting your life. Are there any other ways that you handle it? In terms, because we had a caller earlier on saying he does things like if he's going to the theatre, he'll book a seat on the aisle so he knows he can get out.
Yeah. I haven't done that. I haven't felt the need to do that. I think it's more me sort of trying to deal with my trigger and just not thinking about that too much. But definitely talking, I think. The more you talk about it, it takes sort of the mystery out of it, you know, and you don't feel like you're on your own. So talking to other people, talking to, you know, the GP or counselling service, you know, and not to be ashamed of talking to people about it. You know, I think probably everyone has had that sort of feeling to some degree. But yeah, it's just definitely talking about it, I think, is a big thing.
And if you're listening and you have been through this, it's really important, isn't it, to say to people, Alison, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not weird.
No, definitely.
It's quite common. This happens to so many different people. We all are living much faster lives than we ever have before, and actually we've just got to be a bit kind to ourselves. And I know that's not going to fix anything, but just knowing that and understanding that people do have your back as well if this happens in public. It's important.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alison, for sharing your experience.
That's all right.
And genuinely, I'm really thankful that so many of you have. Alison there telling us about how she's got to grips with her panic attacks over in Cardiff. Liz is on the line from Loughborough. Hello, Liz.
Hello.
Hiya. I read out your sort of advice for anyone who was going through a panic attack. Talk us through it, because you call it your most successful grounding activity.
Yes, so essentially you're counting down from 5 and you're looking for things that are going to kind of distract you, but also make you aware of your surroundings so that you feel comfortable. So it's 5 things that you can see, and it really helps to say them out loud. It sounds daft, and you might feel a bit weird in the circumstances, you know, in the middle of a theatre, but you can just mutter them quietly to yourself. So, you know, where I'm sat, I can see the radio, I can see the TV, I can see the window, I can see the curtains, I can see the exercise bike. And then you say 4 things that you can hear. So obviously I can hear your voice, I can hear the rattle of my earrings against my phone, I can hear the bin lorry outside, and I can hear my kids downstairs. And then 3 things that... it's just going through the senses, so it's
so like 2 things you can smell as well.
Yeah, 3 things you can touch, and you know, so touching the trousers, touching my trainers, touching the chair, and then 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can still taste in your mouth. It's really distracting. And the other thing I found is that it's really hard to have a panic attack if you're humming. You don't have to hum loud, but just simply humming, just to yourself, it really helps you to regulate your breathing, and that is so helpful.
That's been a really big thing that we've been talking about today, regulating your breathing. It can be a really helpful way of sort of coming out of a panic attack. Thank you so much for your advice, Liz. How long have you been living with these panic attacks, by the way?
I started developing when I started going through the menopause. I think that happens to a lot of women.
Really important. Yeah.
You know, I'm HRT now, and thank goodness, and it's made the world of difference. It really has. But you know, learning grounding techniques was just so helpful. And I would say to anyone who's suffering from panic attacks, you don't have to go through this on your own. You know, there are apps out there that can help you. There are friendship groups that you've got,
organisations,
talk to people about it,
the GP,
and organisations,
all sorts of people. Liz, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Liz in Loughborough, she's absolutely right. If you're going through that, you're not alone. There are so many places, so many people that will help. And if I see anyone having a panic attack out on the street, I feel really quite happy to help. I think I might be helpful in this situation now. Thank you so much for being with me through this afternoon. Drive is next with Claire McDonnell and Stefan Powell, and I'll catch you tomorrow at 1.
Rima, thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the number of violent attacks against women and girls on Britain's railways increasing by more than 50% in the last year. And inflation rising as well. We'll also have a look at A-level results. We're looking ahead. The results are coming in tomorrow. How can you prep for them? Does it matter if you don't get what you need?
The voice of the UK.
This is 5 Live Drive.
Yes, you listen to 5 Live Drive with Claire and Stefan with you until 7 o'clock this evening. It's just turned 4 o'clock, so let's bring you your headlines here on 5 Live. A government minister has described an increase of reported incidents against women and girls on trains as a national emergency. New figures show incidents went up 20% in the year to March compared to the previous year. Jess Phillips is Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls.
We need to make our justice system, our police and our courts fit completely for purpose to tackle the most serious offenders of these crimes and to ensure that victims are supported, that when they come forward, and it's one of the issues in this data, I think it was 1 in 6 said that they would report to the police. We have to make sure that people are given confidence to come forward and then action is taken.
The UK's inflation rate has gone up for the first time this year. Overall prices rose by 2.2% in the year to July. That's slightly above the Bank of England's target. Here's our Chief Economics Correspondent, Dashini David.
Prices went up by less than most had feared last month. Is welcome news, but still, higher prices aren't welcomed by many people, full stop. Well, the good news, however, is that on average, incomes are now outpacing the rate at which prices are going up. So many people are starting to feel their money does go a little bit further, that they are able to repair some of the damage that's been done to their standards of living.
A 53-year-old woman has been jailed for 15 months after posting in a Facebook group that Southport Mosque should be blown up with the adults inside. Julie Sweeney from Church Lawton in Cheshire admitted a charge of sending a communication threatening death or serious harm following the violent disorder in the town earlier this month. A man from Rotherham has been given a 3-year prison sentence for his part in trouble outside a hotel in the town that was housing asylum seekers. 49-year-old Trevor Lloyd filmed on a phone as the Holiday Inn Express was attacked on the 4th of August and then followed a group of people into the building. Public health officials in the West Midlands say they're hoping to reduce restrictions very quickly after the 12-mile stretch of canal towpath was closed following a toxic chemical spillage. Tests are continuing after sodium cyanide got into the water in Walsall. And adverts on social media for the nutrition products promoted by Dragon's Den investor Stephen Bartlett have been banned after a watchdog said they were misleading. The Advertising Standards Authority says the ads for Hewell and Zoe didn't make clear that Mr. Bartlett had business interests in the companies. That's your news. Let's get to sport with Molly Stevens.
Thank you, Stefan. England midfielder Conor Gallagher is expected to return to Chelsea's training ground today after arriving back in London last night with his Atletico Madrid transfer very much in the balance. Gallagher's been in Madrid but has been unable to complete his £33 million transfer as the Spanish club needs to make one major sale to fund the deal. Manchester City graduate Gracie Pryor has signed a 4-year deal with the club. It's her first professional deal, and it's a busy day of cricket in the 100. Earlier, Welsh Fire secured a knockout place in the women's competition with a 9-wicket win over Southern Brave. They could even secure top spot and qualification for the final, but that depends on the outcome of Trent Rockets against Oval Invincibles, which is live on 5 Sports Extra. Meanwhile, online, Southern Brave face Welsh Fire in the men's 100.
In the latest travel news, on the roads in Cheshire, the M56 eastbound, 2 lanes are closed between junction 14 at the services at Chester to junction 12. There's been an accident there and traffic is queuing on the approach, so take care. The West Midlands, the M6 northbound, 2 lanes are closed between junction 5 and Spaghetti Junction. Another accident causing some long delays. Congestion is back to the M42 interchange, a little slow on the opposite side of the road as well as you pass that. And on the M25 clockwise, 2 lanes are closed between junction 21A at St Albans and junction 20. There's been an accident and congestion is back to Kings Langley at junction 20 there. Both directions, you've got long delays because of a police incident earlier around Dartford at junction 1B. So the road is now open, but it's still very slow. Congestion is back to junction 3 at the Swanley interchange anti-clockwise. The opposite side, it's queuing back along the QE2 bridge towards Lakeside. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. Hello everybody, welcome to 5 Live Drive on a Wednesday. It's Stefan and Claire. Hello Stefan.
Claire, I'm a bit disappointed.
Why? So early on in the programme.
So early on, we haven't started yet. Where's your party hat?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that.
Where's your party at? Where's the streamers? Where's the balloon?
Nothing. Well, plenty at my house, none here.
And I thought you'd have taken them into the office. I mean, you've very nice jazzy birthday blouse on today, I have to say.
Birthday
Very
blouse?
nice, yeah.
It's just blouse I put on. But thank you very much. It is my birthday. Is that what you're getting at?
Happy birthday, Claire.
Thank you.
Pembroke hapus i ti.
Yes, and the same to you. No, not the same to you.
I was June, actually. I didn't get a text, for all you wondering.
No, gosh, I didn't know. I need dates, Stefan. Thank you very much. It's great to be here on my birthday. We've got a packed show for you. We're going to be talking, as we were just hearing in the news there, about violent attacks against women and girls on Britain's railways. It's a rather depressing story because they've increased more than 50% in the last 2 years. We'll hear from some young voices who are trying to do something about it on the programme today. We want to hear your experiences. 2, we will look ahead to A-level results day. My goodness, it's such a sort of day of trepidation the day before, isn't it? So we're going to be looking ahead to that. And talking to a woman, I mean, it's a great story. A woman who left school with nothing, literally nothing, and went back into education later in life. And I know you can say these people are outliers, but it's always good to hear those voices, because it just goes to show life isn't a race, is it, Stefan? Do you know what I mean?
And it definitely feels like, even to this day, it was certainly the case when I did my A-levels, and it was built up as this mega thing that, you know, if you didn't quite go your way, that was the end of your life as you know it, and you have to come up with a plan B. You don't, actually.
No. It's a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
So listen, we've got some good voices and great pointers of BBC content we're going to direct you to, if you're parents, if you're teenagers listening to this, over the next 24 hours, that will help you with whatever your outcome is. So stay tuned for that.
Lots of serious big issues on the programme today, and also we're talking about some long-lost pygmy goats.
Why
because
not?
It's variety, you know, Claire. It's the spice of drive.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking about, and we're actually wondering if you've got any stories of perhaps a long-lost pet of yours, because these pygmy goats have been returned to their herd and their owners after turning up 200 miles away. Wow, 200 miles away.
With those little legs?
I know. Can you believe it?
I think they got taken, didn't they, in all seriousness?
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry,
handbrake turn there.
I'm still hoping that the other goats that were taken would be also returned one day. So that is going to be coming up before the end of the hour. That amazing story, we're going to tell you all about it.
Yeah.
And also, so have you ever been reunited with a long-lost pet?
Oh, yeah, that's a great, I mean, there'll be some great tales on that one. I just wanted to add, we have an Olympic record holder joining us on Drive in the next hour. Duncan Scott, winner of 8 Olympic medals, 2 gold, 5 silver in the pool, and he basically has taken Chris Hoy's crown as the Olympian with the most medals. So it's going to be an absolute pleasure to talk to him all on the way here on Drive.
Brand new season begins. More live Premier League football than anywhere else.
Unbelievable strike. The stadium is on its feet.
Live and exclusive on BBC Radio 5 Live. On Sunday, Brentford versus Crystal Palace. And Chelsea versus Manchester City.
What a game!
And keep up to date on everything football, every day with the Football Daily Podcast.
5 Live Premier League Sunday.
Listen Sunday from 12.
On 5 Live and BBC Sounds.
The voice of the UK.
This is 5 Live Drive.
Thank you for joining us. 8 minutes past 4. The number of violent attacks against women and girls on Britain's railways has increased by more than 50% in the last 2 years. finished last? I'm like...
It's the what if that bothers me. I am a worrier. I do worry a lot about things, but when you hear in the news that it's actually happening, it heightens that worry.
Well, let's talk about this further with Hera Hussein, who set up CHEN. It's an international organisation that fights against gender-based violence. And Hera was sexually harassed on a train and went through the reporting process. Well, welcome to the programme, Hera.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate you being with us. I mean, the figures, the top line of this story today, an increase of more than 50% in the last 2 years. We were hearing, obviously, when you're coming up from a very low base of COVID and nobody being on public transport, that could explain some of the jump. But I guess we're talking about something that isn't going away anytime soon. What is your feeling about that figure, first of all?
Yeah, I think that the fact, whenever we're looking at reports of any kind of gender-based violence, we know that it's a subsection of a larger underreported, incidents. And also reports could mean that more people are reporting rather than that more of that crime is happening. We don't know. The picture is not there. I have a baby with me in the room, so you may hear the baby as well.
Of course.
So yeah, that's kind of like how I see that. But what is really important is that we think about some of the other numbers that have come up. One, that it happened mostly during rush hour. 51% said that someone intervened. I see that as positive, that is much higher than I would have imagined, because 90% of the time when something has happened to me, no one has said anything. People avoid looking in your direction even though they know what's happening. It's just mostly women looking at each other with supportive glances, and you pick yourself up and then try to move somewhere else or do something to remove yourself from the situation. That is what I think we need to focus on, is the fact that we have 49% of incidents where no one has intervened. How can we encourage people to intervene safely, so that to really call out this kind of action and make sure that people, we increase the cost of being a creep on public transport. We increase the cost of doing these kind of crimes.
Yeah. I mean, many people listening to this,
touching,
we'll get into that. Many people listening to this will say, we're focusing on the wrong end here. We're focusing on people standing up when it happens, when we should be focusing on what is driving more and more men to behave in this way.
Yeah, I think we kind of need to do everything at the same time, because stopping men from doing these actions, that is not a short-term approach. That is a long-term approach. How can we prevent this kind of violence from happening? How can we encourage boys to see women's bodies not as like a public property, but as an independent, free of abuse, free of entitlement? All of that, it takes a longer time, but in the short term, bystanders can do their job in making it and not think that this is, it's not my place to say something.
What happened with you?
Everybody's place to say something.
Yeah, what happened with you in your case? There was you kind of went through the process, didn't you, of reporting it, but tell us what happened.
Yeah, actually, I think of all the things that I personally experienced on public transport, this was probably not even the worst one, but I ended up reporting this. I was on a train ride from London to Glasgow to see my parents. It was the last train of the day. It was getting to Glasgow around midnight, and my carriage was deserted. A very drunk man got on and sat in front of me and tried to touch my chest and was mumbling. I was very scared, and I saw there were some young girls in my carriage as well. So I felt like I had to do something. So I kept up the small conversation, and then he just eventually got up and left and then sat near them. So I spoke to the train driver, who immediately took action. When we arrived in Glasgow, the man was taken by the police, and I was interviewed. And over a year, the police kept investigating this, and they kept in touch with me. And then I was asked to go to court. So I flew to Glasgow a year later to have my day in court, and then after waiting for I think 3 or 4 hours in the waiting room, waiting for my case to be called, I was informed by the prosecutor that they were dropping all charges because there was not enough evidence. He was too drunk, he didn't remember, and that was it. So it felt like a futile exercise. What I actually wanted was for him to confront what he had done, especially since he didn't remember it. and to see the impact it had on me and could have had on other people, and for him to like really like apologize for it and just take some responsibility, and that's kind of all what I wanted. But I wasn't really given that option, and then I was dragged through this process, which didn't result in anything, and I feel like it was a waste of public resources.
Yeah.
So this is just one example of why many people don't report.
It sounds like an exhausting or emotionally as well. Hera, final point. Tell us a little bit about your organisation, CHEN, this international organisation that fights against gender-based violence. Was that spurred on by your individual experiences, or just wanting to kind of get involved in that whole debate and try and affect some positive change?
Well, CHEN started way before this incident happened, and it's about supporting survivors to identify, you know, the trauma that they're experiencing, and that it's not their fault, and then to heal from it. So looking at both domestic violence, sexual violence, online violence, and yeah, we work across 14 languages. Everything is free, and it's all around helping survivors heal from that trauma. And really, like, you know, it's about that internal work to reassure like survivors that they deserve to be respected, happy, free, and both in their private spaces and also in the public space.
Well, listen, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much, because we're going to be talking about this a lot on the programme this evening. So thank you so much for your time, Hera.
Thank you.
That's Hera saying she set up CHEN, this international organisation to fight against gender-based violence, and she was talking to us, as you heard, because the number of violent attacks against women and girls on Britain's railways has increased by more than 50% in the last 2 years. If you have gone through something like that, and you feel strong enough to come on and talk to us about it, we really appreciate that, or just to share your story, you can text us on 85058. 18 minutes past 4.
Now, coming up here on Drive in just a moment, we're going to be talking about inflation. We're going to be finding out what rising prices are doing to people and businesses across the UK. And then after past, as A-level results loom very large for some people tomorrow, perhaps you're getting ready, prepping for it in whatever way you can. We're going to be talking to a woman who offers a huge amount of hope if things don't quite go to plan tomorrow, and finding out a bit about on the BBC iPlayer and a TikTok event this evening that is happening to get everybody ready for the big day. Because, you know, you will be prepping sometimes the night before, whether you're getting ready, booking lunch, either it's a celebratory lunch or maybe it's a commisseratory. Oh, I can't ever say that word.
Big word.
It is a big word. It's a big word. If you're commiserating, there we are.
Yes, there we are.
Then you need a book lunch, or you're getting ready, getting prepped for the big day tomorrow. Then that's going to be happening as well.
Loads of advice on the way. Before 5, we'll be talking about goats as well. It's just beautiful. We are obliged to do that whenever we talk goats, of course. Pablo making a guest appearance there. Except this time, we're going to be talking about pygmy goats, so perhaps this is more appropriate. Just like, that's a sped up Pablo. We're going to be joined by a woman whose pygmy goats were stolen. She's got all but 2 of them back, happily, and now she wants your help to find the missing pair. All on the way.
BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
We need somebody to look after our economy.
It's the biggest issue in Scotland at the moment.
Wherever you are in the UK, you're part of this with us on this network. 5 Live Drive.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
Yes, thank you very much for choosing us this afternoon. It's Claire McDonnell and Stefan Powell with you until 7 o'clock. Now, we're talking inflation because it has risen slightly for the first time since December last year. So prices rose by 2.2%, which is less than expected actually, and is mainly driven by the cost of our gas and our electricity. It means the price is still going up, but that increase is slower than it has been for the last couple of years. So our chief economics correspondent is Dashini Devi.
Prices went up by less than most had feared last month, which isn't, you know, it's welcome news, but still, higher prices aren't welcomed by many people, full stop. Well, the good news, however, is that on average, incomes are now outpacing the rate at which prices are going up. So many people are starting to feel their money does go a little bit further, but they are able to afford not just those sort of treats like the odd eye screen, but able to sort of repair some of the damage that's been done to their standards of living. We'll find out more in the next 24 hours. We've got some figures on how the economy performed overall in the last 3 months. Are we firmly on that road to recovery? We'll tell you a bit more in 24 hours' time.
Now, Natalie Selvin-Bruce is founder and managing director of Buttercup Bus Vintage Campers. They're based in Croydon. I spoke to her a little earlier on and asked her what she makes of today's figures.
we're a seasonal business, so these are kind of quite an interesting time where I hate to think about it, but we're getting to the end of summer now and autumn's rapidly approaching. And as a seasonal business that works very much on the festival scene, we sell ice cream, we work very much sort of in the summer months. During the winter, it's all about hibernating and living off the savings that you made in the summer. And there are questions where if things go up in price during our lean winter months, we have to make difficult decisions. So, for example, during the winter, if I've got any ice cream stock left over, it goes into our deep freezers and stays there until needed. But sometimes the electricity is so expensive that it's actually cheaper to get rid of our stock and turn the freezers off than it is to actually store it, which I hate doing.
Natalie, that's heartbreak, all that ice cream.
It's criminal, isn't it? Who would want to, and are those delicious sorbetto, beautiful, beautiful ice creams these are. So we have to get really smart at managing our stock towards the end of the season to make sure we don't over-order. But yeah, tough decisions.
Yeah, and so has it come as a bit of a surprise to you? Were you sort of expecting it? Because I know it's difficult to sort of forward plan, but I guess that's the hard thing of business, right? Is sort of forward planning and sort of being across things. Were you sort of expecting this for this winter for you?
I've kind of learnt that having a sunny disposition about anything like interest rates and bills is gonna get you in trouble. So I always try and even though I have a sunny side demeanour, when it comes to forecasting and numbers, I try and factor in some contingency in there. But there is only so much contingency you can add and still be a viable business. I mean, other things that I'm a little bit concerned about going ahead is it just so happens to have coincided with our mortgage renewal for our industrial unit, which is where we store said freezers and our plastic vehicles. And so when you're looking at borrowing, larger sums for a property, a small percentage can have a huge impact on your monthly outgoings.
Yeah. So you've talked about the ice cream part of your business. You also mentioned that you've got all your vintage campers that you sort of hire out. Will that part of your business be affected differently by these numbers, or is it all generally it's about trying to keep costs down over the winter for you regardless, and this is just bad news for that in general?
It's about keeping the cost down. I mean, people chuckle that I tuck my children into bed at the end of the night and then I tuck the camper vans in at the end of the night. There's no way that I could sell any of them. And so the cost...
Must be a big duvet for that, Natalie, wouldn't it?
You think I'm joking? They do have their own blankets to go over them. They really do. But they have to be indoors. They have to be on drip feeds with, to keep the batteries charged, etc. So the industrial unit is not a luxury, it's something I need to be able to trade. So yeah, I'm watching those numbers very carefully, but also at the mercy of the interest rates.
Yeah. Does that ultimately mean then that you're going to have to pass this price rise on to your customers? I know the business owners that I've interviewed in the past and I speak to hate doing that because you want to offer as part of the reason why people come to you is because you're probably competitive on price, etc. But are you going to have to pass this off on to the customer?
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's funny you mention this because literally this week I got my colleague to put a reminder in my diary that in October, under no circumstances am I allowed to get myself sucked into any other projects and ambitions. I have to sit down, rework the website, test my new prices, and they will be going up ready for the 2025 season ahead. So that will be happening along with the tough decisions like, do we turn our freezers on and off? Have I got the luxury to keep as many staff on over the winter months? Do I need to scale down? It's all about working smarter and leaner.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the impact on staffing as well, because that's an emotional decision, right? And it's difficult as a business owner because sometimes you have to try and detach yourself from the emotion. But ultimately, there are people's incomes, not just yours, but your staff's, potential income on the line here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's quite interesting is, especially seeing the new government come in, seasonal businesses like my own, especially in the event sector, rely heavily on 0 hours contracts, which are mutually beneficial to the team that might be looking for ad hoc work. Perhaps they're retired. I have a lot of people that have retired and just want to bolster their pensions with doing a bit of ad hoc work with me. And that works quite well because I can scale them back in the winter months and bring them back on when things start getting busy. But by cutting back on their winter hours, it means that all the preparation jobs, all the MOTs, all the servicing that we get done on our vehicles has I'd have to do that if I didn't have my team there to support me. So it's that fine balance of how much can I actually take on single-handedly and how much do I actually need to farm out and what can we afford.
Yeah, and just to finish off then, Natalie, looking sort of, I mean, it was hard to look too far into the future, but, you know, with the change of government recently and a sort of a bit of in the landscape, the British economic landscape sort of feels like it's in a bit of a state of flux at the moment and things are changing. Are you broadly positive? I know you've got a sunny disposition, but are you broadly positive about what the future holds for you and your business, or are you thinking, you know what, we can manage the next couple of years, we're going to be okay, that could be yes? I don't know, how do you feel about the future?
The business, thank goodness, is going from strength to strength every year. I learn things, diversify and add things. So I think next year is going to, you know, continue to be a positive year of trading for us. I think where I've got to be wary is where there's a new government coming in, there'll be a stabilisation period where people's confidence needs to be won. And I think perhaps a really good example of that is where we work in the wedding industry, for example. People used to book our services 18 to 24 months in advance to get the date, the colour, the exact service that they wanted.
Yeah.
This last year, people have been making inquiries, phoning me up going, Natalie, what have you got, you know, that we can hire this weekend, which is unheard of. That's like crazy short periods of time. And I wonder whether that lack of trust and willingness by the consumer to commit long-term to bookings is going to be a thing of the past, and I'm going to find myself mobilising vehicles with 48 hours notice. I think that's going to be a trend that continues for the year ahead.
That was Natalie Selvin-Bruce there, the founder and managing director of Buttercup Bus Vintage Campers based in Croydon, talking to me about the latest inflation figures. You're listening to Drive, it's coming up. Oh, it's almost, wait, I'm going to do it exactly. It's exactly 28 minutes past 4.
That's nice symmetry to that. We are continuing the conversation throughout the day regarding violent attacks against women and girls on Britain's public transport. Nikki did it as a phone-in on your call today, a huge response. These attacks have increased more than 50% in the last 2 years, and more than a third of women have been subjected to sexual harassment or offences whilst commuting, especially at rush hour. Let's talk to women's campaigner Alice Jackson. Hello, Alice.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, and it's a worrying upward trend, this, isn't it? And it seems to be that women forced to commute in the time zones that we all are a bit of sitting ducks in this situation.
Absolutely, but I think, you know, what we want to be talking about when we're talking about violence against women is those who, you know, bear the responsibility for it. And I think one of the things as well, thinking about rush hour and obviously the extremity of violence against women in rush hour and on public transport, I think although it's terrible, I think in some ways it's challenging this idea that violence against women is something that happens at night, and actually violence against women is something that happens at all times of the day. And I know that may sound obvious, but I think these figures put it in, you know, bring it into light, really.
Yeah, are you worried that it's because it's going up, and there is a feeling that, I mean, we just heard from a campaigner earlier who actually, this is her specialism, this is what she does for a living. Her name is Hera Hussain, and she went through the criminal justice system, and it all kind of fell apart at the end. Is there a feeling that women, knowing it's wrong, might be traumatised by it, but don't necessarily want to come and put themselves up for that, going through that whole process?
Yes, I think something that we've seen in the last 10 years, but also I think, you know, chronically, is that this is something that, you know, this is part of the justice system that's really underfunded, and something that's often, you know, not a lot of work needs to be done basically to make the system better for survivors of sexual violence. And I think also we've got to talk about police reform as well. I mean, we've seen over the last 5 years a number of reports come out condemning the state of policing in the UK and the levels of misogyny and racism and homophobia. And I think a lot of women feel scared to report, or feel that it's not worth their time reporting, either because they don't feel that they're going to be taken seriously by the system, or the system's going to mishandle their case, and it's going to be a really long, drawn-out process that potentially re-traumatises them even further.
We've got this statement from British Transport Police. They say tackling sexual offences is a priority. We take all reports seriously. No place for sexual harassment or sexual offences. And they also say this: we have patrols of uniformed and specially trained plainclothes officers across the railway day and night to catch offenders and reassure passengers as they travel, along with access to over 150,000 cameras across the railway network, which can provide us with clear, high-quality images. And we were hearing early from Hera, who said that, you know, when she went and told the train driver, he did do something about it, and it was reported, and they did pick up on it. But I guess there's only so much they can do. We need to be tackling the root cause of the behaviour in the first place.
Absolutely, and I think there is a lot of work being done to support people who are experiencing violence in public and sexual harassment. But unfortunately, a lot of that work has to happen after the fact. Now, whether it's finding the perpetrator or arresting the perpetrator, that all happens after this act of violence or act of harassment has been committed. And I think what we need to be doing is actually looking to address the root causes of misogyny. I think we're seeing, unfortunately, especially among young people, though they are not exclusively responsible, a real rise of sexist views and sexist behaviour that's going, unchallenged. And I think we have a pastoral responsibility to young people to help them understand why these views are unacceptable, and also to challenge behaviour if they see it, or not tolerate behaviour if they experience it themselves. And I think addressing the root cause of the problem means that we are safer as a society, and no one actually is subject to this kind of violence and harassment.
And just a quick word from you, because the Minister for Safeguarding Violence Against Women and Girls is Jess Phillip, and she was talking about this today with journalists, and she was asked whether she supported the idea of women-only carriages on trains, and she rebuffed that, saying the day I ask women to change their behaviours in order that we are not assaulted on transport is a day you can absolutely take to the airwaves and say that I have failed. She says women-only spaces are vitally important in other areas of our life, but in our public realm on our transport system, I would never suggest that women have to take that action. It's about attitudes. Presumably you would agree with that.
I would agree. I think what we've got to do is make spaces safe for everyone rather than segregating them. And I think, again, that starts with again, a cultural shift and a social shift. And I think something as well that I want to highlight before I go is that I think on this issue, a lot of these discussions happen and they're really important and they're really vital. And I think we all acknowledge that violence against women is a real issue, but I sometimes think that sympathy can lead to apathy. I think people think that agreeing with the principle that this is a bad thing is enough, but that is just the reality. And actually, it doesn't have to be. We can all take action, and I want to see people taking action in their own lives to call out behaviour, to reflect on their own behaviour, and to make a safer, community for us all.
Alice, it's been great having you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Alice Jackson, a women's campaigner there. Love to hear from you. Have you been one of those people who's called out that kind of behaviour when you've seen it on public transport? Whether you're a man or a woman, have you raised your voice and stood up and stood together and protected someone who was on the receiving end of this kind of harassment? Love to hear from you. Or maybe you yourself have been on the receiving end of it. What did you do? Did you speak up? And did you have faith in the system that if you actually reported it and went along with everything, you would get the result that you needed? 85058. Let's get the news headlines.
The voice of the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, has described an increase of reported incidents against women and girls on Britain's railways as a national emergency. Like we've just been hearing on the programme, new figures show the level of violence, harassment and sexual offences is up 20% over the past year. The Bank of England says it expects inflation to go up to 2.75% in the coming months before falling next year. Figures out today show it was up 2.2% in the 12 months to July. A woman who posted on Facebook that she thought the Southport Mosque should be blown up with all the adults inside has been jailed for 15 months. 53-year-old Julie Sweeney from Church Lawton in Cheshire admitted the charge against her. The court heard she was responding to an online post picturing people helping repair the mosque in Southport after it was damaged during violent disorder earlier this month. And tests are continuing on water in a 12-mile stretch of canals in the West Midlands after a toxic chemical spillage. People have been urged to stay away from the towpaths between Walsall and Birmingham, plus connected waterways in Wednesbury, Tipton and West Bromwich. That's your news. With the sport, here's Molly Stevens.
Thank you, Stefan. There are 3 first-round matches tonight in the League Cup. We'll have commentary of Leeds United versus Middlesbrough at Elland Road here on 5 Live. After missing out on promotion last season, Leeds started their championship campaign at home to newly promoted Portsmouth on Saturday, which ended 3-3. Now, Leeds manager Daniel Farke believes a good run in the Cup will instill a winning mentality into his team to take into the league.
Will also go highly motivated into this game because made it clear also several times I'm a big believer in cup competitions. We want to go through into the next round. I know it's not realistic that we will win the Carabao Cup, but you never know. So you also want to achieve sometimes something unrealistic.
The game kicks off at 8 o'clock. We'll also have updates of Plymouth Argyle at home to Cheltenham Town, and then Sheffield Wednesday, who travel to Hull City. They kick off at 7:45. Also tonight, Real Madrid play Atalanta in the UEFA Super Cup. Real midfielder Eduardo Camavinga will miss the match and the first portion of the season after sustaining a knee injury. Elsewhere, England midfielder Conor Gallagher is expected to return to Chelsea's training ground today after arriving back in London last night with his Atletico Madrid transfer very much in the balance now. Gallagher's been in Madrid but has been unable to complete his £33 million transfer as the Spanish club needs to make one major sale to fund the deal. Manchester City graduate Gracie Pryor has signed a 4-year deal with the club. It's her first professional deal. Now then, cricket. Lots of live cricket today, and in the Women's 100, Welsh Fire have qualified for the knockouts after beating Southern Brave. They could even secure top spot and qualification for the final, but that depends on the outcome of Trent Rockets against Oval Invincibles. Nikesh Shrugani is at Trent Bridge.
Yeah, this one a virtual quarter-final between the Trent Rockets and the Oval Invincibles. Trent Rockets batted first and posted just 91 for 8 from their 100 balls, thanks largely to Ash Gardner with 43, really held that innings together. But the Oval Invincibles, who do have a chance to go top if they are to record a very big win here against the Trent Rockets, currently going along quite nicely in their reply. They're 23 for 1. And that is after 21 balls of the innings. Chamari Atapatu, the wicket to fall, making 16 from 17. In fact, the scoreboard ticking along now, just a touch more. 77 balls remain then for the Oval Invincibles, 68 runs required. Remember, a win gets them through to the eliminator. A big win could see them finish above Welsh Fire and straight through to the final.
Nikesh, thank you very much. Commentary with Nikesh and the team continues on 5 Sports Extra. Atif Nawaz is in Southampton for the second match of the day after that earlier win for Welsh Fire women. It's now, well, it sounds like a party there, to be honest, at the moment, Atif. Southern Brave.
There is indeed.
I can tell. Southern Brave men against Welsh Fire men, though. How is the actual action going?
Well, it's the Welsh Fire men who've taken their turn to dominate. Really, it was raining sixes a little bit earlier here at Southampton as the Welsh Firemen put on 181 for 5. They're already out of the competition. They can't make it through to the next round, but they can spoil the party for the Southern Brave men who desperately need a victory to qualify for the eliminator on Saturday. It was Luke Wells who got 53 off 30 balls, and Glenn Phillips who hit 2 sixes in excess of 100 metres here at Southampton. That really scintillated the crowd here. It was just some breathtaking hitting to watch, and after scoring 181 from the 100 balls, they've taken a wicket second ball as well. So Welsh Fire very much in control here, and they could knock the Southern Brave out of the competition here today.
Right, thank you very much, Atif. We'll keep an eye on that then. That's available on BBC Sport Online. And finally, if you missed it earlier, BBC Sport and ITV have agreed a deal to broadcast next year's Women's Euros. Every match of the tournament, which begins on the 2nd of July, will be shown in the UK, with the final available on both channels. That's your latest from BBC Sport.
In the latest travel news, on the roads in the West Midlands, the M6 northbound, all traffic is being held at the moment between Junction 5 and Spaghetti Junction. There's been an accident there. Recovery work is ongoing at the moment, so you've got pretty long delays already. Congestion back to the M42 interchange. Hopefully that should reopen as soon as that can be moved from the road, but expect delays for a little while. The West Midlands, the M6 southbound, there was an accident earlier between Junction 8 and 7. That has now been cleared, but you've got queuing traffic because of that. In London, the M4 westbound, you've got queuing traffic because of a broken down vehicle after Junction 2 at Brentford. It's just been cleared, but there's congestion to Hammersmith along the A4 currently. And a couple of problems on the M25 clockwise. One lane is closed because of a broken down lorry after Junction 21A at St Albans. Traffic looking slow there. And in both directions, there was a police incident earlier around Junction 1B at Dartford. That's been cleared, but still very long delays. Congestion is to the Swanley interchange anti-clockwise. If you're going clockwise, it's back along the QE2 bridge towards Lakeside at Junction 30. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
Ellie, thanks very much indeed. It's 5 Live Drive. It's Stefan and Claire today, and I reckon, Stefan, we're around about halfway through the summer holidays. I left a house full of teenagers, one of whom was playing the Xbox. Another one I dropped at their kind of Saturday job in a cafe. Lord alone knows what the other one's doing. It's a bit feral, isn't it?
They're out and about.
Well, they're out and about.
Yeah.
They're of an age. They're okay. But it's summer holidays, isn't it? I've been doing an interview with a writer and comedian, Aniki Somerville, who wrote this brilliant piece in the newspaper about she tried 1980s summer holiday parenting for a week.
What, leave them to it?
Leave them to it, basically. It's basically...
Is that it?
Yeah. Well,
Crack on.
back in the day, it was like you got sent to your gran's.
Yeah.
You cycled up and down the front path on a bike, I don't know, for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
And you just generally, you had the occasional day out. But she did this because she thought, you know, I need to react against this whole kind of being there all the time. She's self-employed, she has to work, and she actually found some real positives about just saying, look, you just go off and entertain yourselves. Not on screens, just kind of do stuff together. So we're going to play that interview shortly. It was funny, because she's revisiting her summer holidays with her gran, who, when she'd get up in the morning and go, Gran, what are we doing today? She'd just go, got no idea. Got nothing planned.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go along. So I'd love to know, you know, how you entertained yourself back in the day. It could have been 1980s, summer holiday, 1990s, whatever it was. And maybe what you're doing now with your own kids. I mean, because those summer holidays are long. How are you getting through it? But not spending money, not going on big trips or anything like that. We'd love to hear from you, 85058.
Escape with a good book on BBC Sounds, like Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kwong.
I play up our connection. My grief over her death becomes a cornerstone of my origin story.
Enlightenment by Sarah Perry.
Thomas examined the image of a stone woman stuck on the verges of the lake. I suppose she's in the water now. What is she holding?
And Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin.
Do you have a mistress? I asked him. I don't seem to be very interested in women right now.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
The voice of the UK.
This is 5 Live Drive.
Now, thousands of teenagers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland are preparing for exam results day. They're going to find out how they've done in their A-levels tomorrow, and we'll get some advice and tips on getting ready for results day shortly. But first, we're going to talk to Anna Champneys, who is the perfect example of someone who the adage, it's never too late to get back into education, works perfectly, no matter what results you got. Anna left school at 16 with no GCSEs, and now almost 30 years on, she has a PhD and teaches more than 100 university students, and she's with us now. Anna, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, there's so many anxious people around the country listening to this now and their parents, but you left without anything, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I actually left without taking a single GCSE, so just when I turned 16, I had a September birthday, so I was sort of the oldest in the year, and as soon as I turned 16, I left before taking any exams.
Right. So what happened? Did you just go get a job?
I did, yeah. So I just did jobs sort of cleaning pubs. I was worked in a roadside cafe and things like that just to earn some money. So I did that for a couple of years, yeah.
And when you decided to come back to education, quite spectacularly, because you've done incredibly well, what drove you to that point?
I think, looking back, it wasn't the learning aspect that I had an issue with. I love learning, I always have, but I found school really difficult, how regimented it was. I struggled to focus and get motivated on subjects I perhaps wasn't necessarily really interested in, and so it wasn't that hard for me to have the motivation to do something I was interested in, if that makes sense. So when I did go back, I found something I was very passionate about, and that made all the difference.
Tell us about your passion.
Wildlife, basically, wildlife and animals. So I'm really into wildlife conservation, have been from a young age, and I just found my way there. I discovered there was a degree in wildlife conservation, which I hadn't even realised existed when I was at school. And so, yeah, that's what I did.
And now, I mean, you went back, you got a degree, you got a PhD as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I did a PhD in water shrew habitat distribution and selection. They're a small mammal native to the UK, and I just spent 5 years studying their sort of habits and behaviours.
How does it feel then to now be the person who rejected education, not, as you say, not learning, but traditional education, and now here you are in front of thousands of students, leading them on their learning journey? I guess you're a great role model for the ones who find it tougher.
Yeah, I think it has given me insight, and I completely understand how it feels to not know what you want to do with your life and to struggle. So I just have some more empathy, I guess, for those students that aren't sure what they want to do or haven't done as well as they wanted.
Yeah, because I suppose, you left school, the education system, before you could kind of choose. When you get to A-levels, you're refining, aren't you? You're getting to the nitty-gritty of what you're really interested in. I mean, the thing is, there's so much choice these days, and when you think about it, kids are still so young at 16, 17, 18. They may have chosen A-levels that they weren't necessarily completely convinced in. They may still be quite confused about what they want to do next. And there's a story today saying lots of A-level students are waiting to actually apply for places. That, there's a delay on all of that this year. So what would you say to people? Because obviously, how old were you when you actually took your degree?
I went back when I was 23 years old, when I started my undergraduate degree. I think it's really hard to narrow subjects down. So I didn't do my A-levels. I would have found that really difficult. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on how important it is to choose the right subjects. But I don't think any subjects are ever wasted. Whatever you're learning about, whatever course you do, that is still a really valuable educational experience. So I don't think you can make the wrong decision, and you can always do more courses. You can always study further, whatever you do. So even if you realise that perhaps that's not the right one for the course you want to take in the future, you can do something else.
Yeah, education is never wasted, is it? If you commit to it and you throw yourself into it, and as you say, you don't have to have all the answers now, do you?
No, definitely not. I mean, my students come in at 18 typically. Obviously, we do have mature students, but at 18 years old, I see how young they are, and it makes me realise just how young I was. And then when you think about being 16 and doing your GCSEs, they're children. How can you possibly know at that age what you might want to do? And, it's just impossible, really.
I'm very sort of attuned to the fact that whenever these dates come around every year, and we say to people, don't panic, it'll all come out in the wash, but it's very, very different when you're the person in it, and it feels like the world is on your shoulders. You've got expectations on yourself, maybe expectations of other people as well, for you to get certain grades. What would you say to anybody listening who's feeling that way now?
I would say it truly is not the end of the world. It's not the biggest thing in your life. You're so young, there's so much time, and the time that, you might have not in education for whatever reason, or in between deciding what you want to do, is never wasted. That's really valuable life experience. And people that come back into education even a year, 2, 3 years later, or even 30 years later, it just gives them a different perspective, and it's just so valuable.
Anna, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries, thank you very much.
Anna Templey's there, and she is at, if you want to know, Nottingham Trent, doing that course, leading those students there, Nottingham Trent University. Let's talk to Hazel Shearing, who will be answering questions on a live stream on BBC iPlayer from 7:30 this evening, all about getting ready for Results Day. Hi, Hazel.
Hello.
So what are you doing? Tell us first of all what's going on after 7:30.
Well, we appreciate that it is the eve of Results Day. Level 3 results coming out tomorrow, A-Techs, A-levels and B-Techs and T-levels. And you might have some questions. It might be that you've sat exams and you've had some questions, or it might be that you are living with someone, that you have a child who's sat exams and have some questions. So what we want you to do is send us in your questions. So you can do that via the BBC News TikTok and Instagram page. And then you can tune in from 7:30 because we will be answering them live. You can tune in on the BBC iPlayer, on the BBC News Instagram and TikTok, and you can look at the live page on the website.
That's fantastic. So any kind of question, whatever you're concerned about, just write it down, get it in, and then watch it live on iPlayer from 7:30. You'll cover as much as you can.
Exactly that. We'll do our very best. And we've also got another Q&A session tomorrow on Results Day itself at 11:30 on the live page that will be on the BBC News website. So any that we don't get around to this evening, or we need to do some more working out, or whatever it is, we will do our very best to get to it this evening or in tomorrow's Q&A.
And a little tip then on parents who have very nervous children in their houses tonight. What would you say to them?
I would say it is obviously a time that can cause tension in the house. It's best to be as supportive as you can and to really channel listening, but also there are some practical things you can do to help out. So if your child is worried that they might not get the results that they need to take the next step, whether that is going on to university or they want to go down a specific apprenticeship, for example, something like that, you can encourage them to do as much research as possible, and you can do the research as well, because if it ends up that you are sat with your child on results day tomorrow looking at the UCAS clearing website, that's the page where universities advertise their vacant courses, then you may very well want to be up to speed with what needs to happen and when, because it's a big day. So the more you can read up, the better informed you'll be. Another tip, and I would recommend, by the way, going to the BBC News website, because we have a tips piece for parents. If you look at the education section of the BBC News website, is talked about communications, a comms plan with your family, because it may be that that your child doesn't want the whole family bombarding them tomorrow morning asking how they did. So it's good to get a comms plan in place as well.
That is brilliant advice. It really, really is. So Hazel, we have to watch you on iPlayer at 7:30. Is that correct?
That is absolutely right.
Brilliant. So tune in and send questions in via the means that Hazel has just given, the medium rather, that Hazel has just given us. Hazel, thank you so much for joining us. It's 5 Live Drive and it's 8 minutes to 5.
Now, after 5, we're going to be trying to find out what the authorities are doing to try and tackle the rise in assaults and sexual harassment against women and girls on public transport. We've been talking about it already in the programme. More on that story after 5. We're also going to be hearing about the sentences for more people prosecuted for their parts in the recent riots.
Yes, also before then, as advertised, we're going to be talking disappearing pygmy goats in a moment, and later in the programme. In those long summer holidays when we were children, when we just weren't taken out as much. We're going to talk to a woman who's been putting that to the test by inflicting an old school 1980s style long summer holiday on her children. So think no screens and lots of mucking about in the field. Lots of people are getting in touch, Stefan, about what they used to do. Yeah. Go on.
Well, we have this one that says, from Kirsty in Coventry, says, I spent endless summers with my gran, learning the art of jumble sale rummaging, always looking for bits of second-hand makeup. I once found a pan stick and spent the rest of the summer with a strange...